am going to take a swig of my water real quick because I've been running my mouth for hours. All right, here we go.
Oh, is mine coming through on the line or?
Yep, I can see it. It's spiking on my end.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll just record in the background.
Good. Just I like to have it in the background just to be safe.
Perfect.
So, all right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Loot Bros podcast. I'm your host, Residentdarrell, and with me this week to end out 2021, I have a very special guest. I can't think of a better way of ending this year of podcasting than having this guest on. He is a man on the run, some would say. Very newly cemented the #1 trophy hunter in Australia. And if I'm a bit of a guessing guy, I would say that soon to be the #1 achievement hunter in Australia. We have the Affectatious donk himself. We got CJ. What's up, brother?
Hey, thanks for having me back on, sir. And before we start, I want to say what an amazing job you've been doing. I've been listening every week. I know you've got a new style a little bit as well. We were talking before we started. You're having some new guests on, and I've really enjoyed listening. In the last couple of weeks, obviously to Kalai and Joe, your regular partners in crime, but also the Game Squad I heard a few weeks ago, and Bearded Nerd. I think it was last week or the week before. I've really enjoyed it. I like this new approach, this new freshness, and some of the games they've been talking about as well. I always love to hear about new games, and they've definitely been sharing. But we'll probably get into that tonight, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, ladies and gentlemen. I did not pay CJ to say nice things about the show. As a matter of fact, I said be brutally honest, and so you can collect your check afterwards.
Well, I mean, you did tell a lie. I don't think I'm going to be #1 achievement hunter in Australia anytime soon. I think Meth has got that well and truly in the bag, at least for the next 10 years or so.
Well, when you and I first started socializing and hanging out digitally, you were like hanging around number 69 on the leaderboards for the longest time. And at first I thought that was intentional, but then
lovely position to be in.
I realized that it wasn't necessarily that you wanted to be the old 69th, but you just hadn't quite committed to taking the lead yet. And then I've watched you climb the ranks. And then the other day I was just like, you know what? Let's see what he's playing. Maybe I want to steal some little inspiration. And I was like, wow, our trophy lists look oddly similar these days. But sure enough, I saw that you were #1, and I was like, man, whenever we get to talk again, I wanted to talk about that. So before we get into all the crazy cool games and stuff, I kind of want to talk about, like, how do you feel? I know you were trying to get there, or did it just fall into your lap? Or so what's going on?
Yeah, a bit of both. I think it surprised me as well. This is definitely I was trying. So 5 years ago or something, because it's a long time. It's a long-term project. Like, obviously you don't come home every day and go, I've got to chip away to get to the top today. But it happens. It took 5 years or so. And what was so nice about it was, sort of 4 years ago, I met the then #1 Australian Typhoid from Canberra, who was a super nice guy who sort of got me into visual novels. He had a massive physical collection of games. Most of these games, Japanese, you can't buy anywhere, and if you can, exorbitant price. And he's like, here, you can borrow whatever you want, and it's not like he didn't have like 5 or 10, he had hundreds of these things. And this is obviously before Ratalaika and all that sort of stuff. So we formed quite a good friendship. And from him, I sort of got to know a lot of the higher ranked, or more serious, I suppose, should say, trophy hunters in Australia. Most were in Melbourne. And we sort of had this network going of his games for a while. And unfortunately, they burnt out or whatever else. And around that time, this guy, this Meet the Fucker, came up. And he was just like a machine. And the only way that I caught him was the fact that he burnt. I'm not sure. I don't want to say burn out. I think he just stopped. Like, in the last 7 months or so, he just almost stopped completely. He's still playing, by the look, like longer games and things. And ironically, he's from Canberra as well. And I don't know him personally or whatever. I think he thinks I'm a bit of a fuckwit, which is it's fine. Many people do. I harbor that nicely. But, so we never had anything to do. And I didn't assume that I'd ever catch him or whatever else. I was more worried about the guy behind me, who's a young kid, basically, passing me. And he's really dedicated, especially to Japanese games and foreign games as well. He's also a highly skilled gamer. which makes it difficult, Darrell, when you're playing against these people that are highly skilled and you can't play any of those games, or you do, but they take you 5 hours when they should take you 1, sort of thing. So I did get very lucky. I picked up like 700,000 points on him in the last few months just because he literally basically stopped, and he seems to have stopped or whatever. So it's quite good, I think. Like, well, I was quite happy with it. I mean, it's just an individual goal. It always has been to play myself. And the funniest thing is like the last few months, I've definitely been playing a huge amount of spam, hundreds of games or whatever else to rein him in. But it's the last, I didn't expect to get there till the end of the year, perhaps if he stopped and completely, and sort of getting there. It's opened up. Like, I've been playing a lot of the longer games anyway, but it just feels nice to just, sort of like I have a spam buddy. I suppose that's the butt buddy, spam buddy, if you like, that he doesn't want to stop. And I'm like, I think I'm going to take a few weeks. He goes, oh, whatever. These are all the games. And he's just like, these are what we have to do, all this piling in. And so he's going ham still, which is awesome. And, perhaps one day, maybe through competitions or something, I'll get back to some of them as well. But yourself, some of those spam games are actually fun too. So, and some of them are like 1 minute, so why not do them?
Well, hey, you know what? I tell myself they're fun, whether they really are or not.
Some are fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But so normally here on the Loot Bros podcast, we have a whole rigmarole, things we go through, different topics, whatever. We're going to be doing the show different. So this is actually where I want to do the toast, and the toast tonight is the fact that you are number 1 in Australia. I don't think there is anything cooler going on right now that we could celebrate than that. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
That's right.
Now, just while you're doing that, it's so funny. I'll give a shout out to this Dino Raw. He's the number 2 gamer in the UK. And he's in a similar position to I was, that he's chasing a guy that perhaps is more than one guy. So it's going to be very hard for him to ever catch him. But he's well ahead of me on the overall boards, and he's a guide writer. He writes at node.com guide. Sorry for the plug, shameless plug there, but they're an independent site. If you like shorter games, it's definitely the site to go to. They have text guides for everything, but they also do a hell of a lot of reviews of all sorts of games, not just PlayStation, even some retro games as well. So it's well worth, a check node.com to go and check for guides or just to see what they're up to. But he sort of sent me a message, and I thought, like, it's funny because you say that, over, but nobody really understands how many thousands of hours have gone into creating such a ridiculous amount of digital nothings, except for someone that's even higher up the board than you. And he sort of sent me this message or whatever and thanked me and stuff, and I was like, for me to move again to him would take even more thousands of hours. And I thought it's sort of a weird sort of respect now, because I know how much time it took to get there, and then if you were to go any further, I think how much time, and what it also taught me, and I know Hakum is a divisive figure or whatever amongst some of the bullshit people in the community, which is fine, but he's just a human. And what it showed to me was, like, he was number 1 for like 8 or 9 years or something. And to, his score is basically double mine now. And he did that without all the spam and stuff. So, just to maintain anything like that pace it's just astronomical, I think. So I have a lot of even more gained respect, I suppose, if you can say that, for these people, higher up the boards, or, anywhere in the boards, I suppose, if they're playing that. Because you say some of the stuff is fun, some is not, or whatever, but it is a lot of time either way that you need to put in over years. It's not something you get to, in a year or something.
Well, I can respect and I admire what you've been doing, because like you said, most people are going to hear you go, oh, you're number 1 in Australia. Cool. What does that even mean? But it's been a challenge for me the past few years just to break into the top 1,000 here in the States. Like, I don't have an astronomical amount of time to play. So I've got to be very strategic on how I play, which, I mean, anyone who listens to the show for any amount of time knows my complaints on, like, I gotta kind of throw the spam in on the, like, short, when I got 20, 30 minutes here, less than an hour here, and then I got to chip away at a longer game. And I've finally this year broke into the top 1,000, and I'm only ranked 634 in my country. So, like,
very good.
To me, that is a huge accomplishment. And I posted pictures in the Discord and Facebook group because I finally hit 50% completion the other day, which is another thing that, like, has been escaping me forever, because it's like I'll start all these big games but not really have the time to commit to them. And then had it not been for the spam to carry me to 50%, I don't know that I ever would have made it. But it's been that's my goal this coming year, is to clean up my trophy list, clean up my completion. And I've got so many little side bets and side competitions going on. Like next year is going to be pretty spam free for me, so we'll see if I can stay in that top 1,000.
Well, one of the things, like, it's so funny because, like, and I know most of your audience is like blazed eyes and like, oh, look at this fucker go on about his bullshit trophies that took 30 seconds to earn. But one of the things you learn about a lot of these people is, yeah, they're hardcore. Yeah, they're degenerates. Yeah, they'll just pay whatever it costs to buy whatever game, if it's quick or if they're interested. But one of the things is they're incredibly efficient gamers. And I noticed you've noticed this a bit with Rick this year in the backlog. Now, he's not playing short games, but he's playing longer games, but still very efficiently or whatever else. And these people that have been around trophy hunting or achievement hunting, sort of competitively, if you want to say, they are very efficient gamers. And one of the funniest things is, one of your super fans of the show, old Jared, Geezer, I call him, although it's Geyser, I'm sure, but Geezer, Geezer. And he likes to send me these abusive messages occasionally on PSN. I figure it's very late in the night in America, so he's probably pissed or something when he does it. But he sent me one the other day and he's like, oh, I tried to look at your profile the other day because it's, I want to see what you're playing and stuff. And then the second message is, but it's all junk. It's all junk. That's all you play. And then I think he said, you have another profile where you actually play games on. And I was like, look at this prick or whatever else. But, doing this. But then I go, I better look at his profile, this virtuous god of trophy hunting or whatever else. And I look and he's got like Persona 5 at 22%. Now, I'm sure the last abusive message he sent me a month ago, Persona was still at 22%. So what the sir doesn't understand is I've already played Persona. We've played these bigger games as well. So, I'm not saying that you're a slow gamer, sir. I know you have 2 young children or whatever else. It doesn't seem to handicap you writing abusive messages late at night. But I'm not saying you're a slow gamer there. But what you do learn is when you play, and I'm not playing 10 hours a day or anything like that. I'm not playing those sort of games, I suppose. But you do become very efficient, in whether you play stacks back to back or whether you just see things in games. I think that maybe corners to cut in a way. Potentially, that and you know what I mean in stuff in leveling, like even in RPGs, like power leveling things. You factor it in your head where's the best time in the game to do it, and you sort of know that from playing other games of a similar vein. Particularly, you say 40 to 50-hour games. Should I waste time leveling here, or should I push through to here, or potentially should I just leave this game at 50% because the next 50%, if the game's finished, the next 50% will take 100 hours. Those sort of things. So there's efficiency in there as well, I suppose.
So I want to say a couple things and then I want to get to a point. This will all make sense when I'm done. I'll try not to jumble it up, but you doing Avocation to Climb on the YouTube, it has been, to me, like, as a fan of you and a friend of yours, I look at that show and I go, that's perfect for him.
Terrifying.
They get together, but those guys are on your level. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you hang out with us, you are a different type of gamer than we are. And efficiency is one of those qualities, degenerate is another quality. I mean, some would say, maybe not me, but some would say, but like the way that you guys attack a game is almost surgical. And I think it was Cameron, Shadowless Edge. He said something that I just like, it gave me, this is going to sound dumb, but it gave me goosebumps. I was like, makes so much sense. He was like, he's like, there's a technique and an art to even using a guide to finish a game. And he said something along the lines of, it's not only, maybe it wasn't Cameron, maybe but one of the guys on the show said basically that was like, it's not about how much time you spend, it's how efficient you are. Even when it comes to using guides, there's like, knowing how to use them is basically what he had said. And I was like, dude, you're so right, because I can sit here with a guide and move slower through a game than I would if I would just tackle the game and kind of learn the techniques that the game is presenting to me. Whereas there's some games I've been able to throw the guide on and work alongside of it, maybe even a little ahead of it. And listening to you guys as these guys that are, that run in the top of the leaderboard talk, it's been very, very enlightening and exciting for me, because I don't ever know that I'll aspire to try to get into the top 10, top 20. I thought 1,000 was going to be unattainable, but I finally got there. But like knowing even just for me where I'm at, like how there's patterns in a lot of these games. There's things you can do. There's some games that you don't need to necessarily play them. Let them play themselves. Not going to say that's what I do, but
well, you've become good at that from what I see on your True Trophies diff there. You're consistently beating me, and I know it's your fucking turbo controller every week.
Dude, you said something one day, and I was like, I don't remember if it was Push to Plat or if it was Loot Bros, but you said something one day that I was like, oh, that's so smart. You said nothing a good turbo controller can't do. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So I may or may not have bought a turbo controller. And the hardest part about gaming now is the technique I use to keep the turbo controller going.
There's no joke. I play with this English guy, whatever, a racing guy. Now, turbo controller may be helpful in racing, more so this Chronos Max thing with some of your real degenerate audience might know. Now, this is basically a device you can connect to your controller. It's legal, and it will record a loop, if you like. So turbo controller is basic. This will actually record, say, you driving a lap, and then it will replicate the lap. It's a little dicey, of course, because things can happen in the game. But, if you've got to drive thousands of, the same lap, potentially can be very helpful. But you have to write the script, so you need to know a bit of programming and anything. So that line of this guy, and I won't mention his name, but he used to have this rubber band kit of like all these different sized rubber bands, and he'd be collecting them every type you could have, because he'd tell me, CJ, you'd never know what type of rubber band you're going to need on the controller for the angle that you'll need. I was like, isn't that wonderful?
That is, see, that's next level. I would have never thought of that.
Next level.
So Tricky and I, we've been going back and forth lately, and Tricky and I, we got a good thing. Like for anybody who watches wrestling, we got a Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn thing going on. Like those two guys are going to fight forever. That's going to be me and CJ. I mean, I don't mean CJ, me and Tricky, but Tricky and I have been going back and forth, passing each other in platinums, and neither one of us are trying to blow out the other.
No,
it's like a race. You get out in front of the other guy and you slow down a little bit, and then you force them to go around you, and then you slow down a little bit. And so we've been doing this little thing back and forth. And the other day, I got a game, and I noticed after the first stack that I did on the game, I was like, wait a second, you don't have to play. I played the game, I beat the game, and then I learned that I didn't have to do it the hard way. There were cheats in the menu that you could turn on.
I remember listening to that episode thinking.
What the thing was, when I first talked about it, I was like, well, there's a rewind function. So the game's kind of difficult, but if you rewind, you can dodge all this stuff. And then like I go to do the second stack, and I might have saw it on a YouTube video actually, and then went and checked. Sure enough, in the options menu, you can turn on invincibility and everything. So then I did the second stack, and I was like, you don't even have to hold the controller. You can just hold something on the X button, not even with a turbo controller, a regular controller, and it'll play itself. So I did the third and fourth stacks while preparing breakfast for my family.
It's so funny because I remember you listening to that, we're out walking, and that came up or whatever. And initially I was laughing because I was like, at some point he's going to realize that he could have just walked away, when you get to the other stacks. And then later that day, I was just, I've got time on my hands, obviously. And I was just thinking, I bet he knew there were cheats, but he doesn't want to say, he doesn't want to say on air because he doesn't want others to know. And I thought he really is becoming a serious trophy hunter now.
Oh gosh,
because that's the sort of sneaky things people will do.
Well, so I gotta say, I do come to that moral crossroads where I'm like, do I divulge what I'm doing or not? Because what's going to happen is, to the average listener of the show, they're going to roll their eyes and be like, you're disgusting. But then to guys like you and me, it's going to be like, yeah, my man, he knows. So, but I didn't tell Tricky what I was doing. Okay. So that was where I decided to draw. I'll tell my audience, and they can judge me how they want, but I'm not telling the guy I'm competing with.
Yeah.
He sends me a picture of a toothpick that he had wired together in the shape of a cross, holding down his X button while he did those same stacks like a couple days later. Yeah. And it was it genuinely, it made me laugh. So I was like, that freaking guy, he gets it. And it was so funny because I never divulged that I set them up to run on their own at that time. And then he figured it out too. So it was awesome. We've been sending each other messages, little screenshots. And it was just so funny because I was like, I didn't know the first time, but like you said, you start to learn things, especially when you're stacking these games. And it's like, okay, the first time might be my slowest run, my worst run, but now my second, third, fourth, whatever. I tend to not go any farther than the fourth stack. I'm usually done.
Yeah.
that's about as far. I don't do the Asian, Hong Kong, Turkish, Japanese stacks yet. We'll see after if I can make it a year of celibacy from spam. Maybe I'll come back like a vengeance and then just go crazy and get all the stacks. So.
Yeah. Well, I know we're going to move on from this, but the only other thing I'll say, because I know there's a large portion of your audience that thinks this is all bullshit or whatever, which is totally fine. But quite often these angles that are being shot by people that play 6 stacks of the game, and the funny thing is, obviously, the more you play the game, the faster you'll get at it, and none of these games are long to start with, and it was so funny because I'm not sure if you played this Nyx Aurea, Dungeons of Rogues. It's originally a Zidalon, I think it's Zidalon, Xbox game that came across to the PlayStation recently with multiple stacks. And there's a bit of RNG, so the more you know about the game going in, the quicker. And the other day I was like, for the true trophy difference, for some reason, the Japanese stack had a very high difference. I'm not sure why. It's unusual. So I thought I'll do that one or whatever. And I did it. And I thought, wow, this is pretty quick. And the game's been out for a year or something. And I think I did it in 40 minutes and the next person was 45 minutes. So that's pretty rare after a year. But it's just those little things that you pick up from, I suppose, what we were saying before, playing them. There's a few little tricks, which I won't go into to protect my time, obviously, and to protect the diff so I don't get knocked out this week, potentially. But that's the real reason. But the funny thing is I ran into a player a couple of years ago on the Platcast Discord, Mr. Soy, and I'm pretty sure he's still, he's an amazing player because he plays every big game and he plays only one game at a time and he finishes them all, platinums them all. And he's very quick at these games, getting through them, and obviously a high skilled gamer. And, he wants to play all of those games, but he doesn't play any of the garbage. He's just focused on that. And, most of the higher up players, and myself included, we unfortunately fall under this thing that we want to play every game. So you're lucky, Darrell. You want to buy every game, but you don't want to play them all. I want to play them or as many as I can. So any of these little tricks you pick up, and you were saying before, whatever you learn to read a guide. But the truth is, you know the guide writers often, so you can talk to them as they're writing the guide. We're often playing the games before the guide comes out, but you also know a handful of all the other players that are playing these games, and all you have to do is send them a message and say, hey, I need to know about this game. What can you tell me? And they tell you everything you need to know to cut it down or whatever, and you do the same maybe, down the track for them. And there's no way to break into that group, unfortunately. That's just time, and I suppose, and having boosted with them and stuff. But there's a lot of that going on as well. So, there's a lot of you're the one playing it, but you're getting a lot of information that perhaps not everybody else is getting, or at least not in the first month or so.
Well, I'm hoping that our podcast can be a bridge to anybody who wants, maybe they've dabbled in trophies and achievements and they want to go into a full-on degenerate. I'm hoping to provide that. That is my gift to you, the listener.
But I think what we should do is move away from this topic, because 23 minutes in, there will be people swinging from a rope going, for fuck's sake, this guy should get hunted down and shot. Well,
I think you're right. And so it's funny. I actually wanted to break this into 2 sections. I was talking about, real games.
Yeah.
And then some spam, but I think we've probably done the spam all the justice that it needs. So
more so.
Yeah, we'll actually just leave that. We'll leave that. We're not even going to come back to it. With the exception of, have you played Finger Fitness?
Yes. Did you enjoy it?
I really did.
It's like Mayo, wasn't it?
Yes, it was like Mayo, but with haptic feedback and and resistance and stuff on the triggers. That was awesome. I thought that was that's the future right there. That's going to be for all of the spam hunters and all of the degenerates. They're going to have the strongest fingers in the business. So essentially what I wanted to do is, and in no order, whatever comes to mind, shoot from the hip. Let's start talking about just a couple of like the most fun games, maybe the best experiences you've had. Xbox, PlayStation, doesn't matter. Why don't you, CJ, just pick a game and just what's something that was a standout game that you enjoyed this year?
Definitely. Look, just before I do that, though, seeing you ask me one spam question, I want to ask you one as well about a games that I know you've played. I'd love to know what you think about this Christian collective set of groups that come out every Sunday here, cashing in for $1 US for a 1 minute or 2 minute plat with a religious message. As a man of the church, how do you find these? But knowing that most people that play them are there, well, everyone that plays them is there for the plat. But is it an uncomfortable cash grab, or are you happy with it? Are you fine with it?
Modern problems require modern solutions. I think that they're doing the church justice. I think that they're awful games that have a positive message and they are extremely affordable. So subliminally, this group, Breakthrough Gaming, is changing the world, starting with the trophy hunters. They are propelling the gospel of Jesus, and you don't even realize you're getting it. But one day, 1,000 trophies later, you're going to be able to recite the Bible, and you're going to be like, wait a second, this is life changing.
and my final point before we move on, not being a religious man myself, although having read most of the Bible, well, at least in good chunks of it, I never came across the obviously important figure in the Christian belief system, Zippy. How important is Mr. Zippy in the text? Where do I need to read to find him?
I think Zippy is a metaphor for us. I think that Zippy himself is not actually in the Bible, but
no, I'm disappointed.
A vehicle that just navigates its way through to where we could take on the characteristics of Zippy and see how so we can apply the messages that are given to us through each and every game. So you said that you've read a lot of the Bible, and I guarantee you will finish the entire thing before this company's done.
Maybe Zippy's Old Testament, I see.
There you go. No, that's ZJ. ZJ is Old Testament. Zippy is that's after the Jesus. So, but seriously, tell me about a game that you've enjoyed this year.
Yeah, it's so funny because, this time of year obviously is Game of the Year, and I know you guys did that recently on your show, and everybody's doing it. And I was listening to, I don't know, one of the IGN ones yesterday. Might have been their Game Scoop or whatever, and they were doing their awards or whatever else, and one of the guys said, they listed out the games that he'd played for the year, and it was like 20 or 30 games. And, admittedly, he's writing a full review, so he's not just playing it for 10 minutes or something. And but I thought, well, that's that's his full-time job, is to play games and write about them. And I know they do other stuff, but, 22 games. And then I thought, all these people, and some journalists play a lot more, like on Giant Bomb, they're playing, hundreds or whatever. But I thought it's such a hard question to answer because, and again, it's a COVID year, so working from home. So it's, there's a lot of differences, and it'll definitely be the biggest year that I ever play, I think, although the numbers are much higher than normal, but, relatively or so. And I played 530 new games on the Xbox and 904 new games on the PlayStation. All new games started this year. So to label like one or two games is kind of hard. And out of those, I finished 770 on the PlayStation. So, well over 3/4 and about 250 on the Xbox, so about half or so. So, for completely finished or whatever. So it's a lot of games. So what I thought was to save you, a headache, is I just did a couple little categories, and I'll throw out my games in those categories, and then you could add to them or whatever you want. Is that cool? Or
hey man, I think that's awesome.
Just because I thought, how do you write one game, when you've played so many games or something?
Absolutely.
So I suppose for indie, and I don't know, you play I know you play a lot of the the AAA stuff or whatever else, but I think you're getting more into indie games as well. I don't know if that's fair to say. I know you play retro stuff, so I don't see that in the same. But
yeah, I like games, so I have some years that are indie heavy, some years that are not so much. So, but yeah, I love a good indie game.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, like a good portion of my time, and I'm always conscious of this because of, the shorter games, and also I'm interested in new stuff, is spent playing indie games. And so while the AAA games are like massively long, it's probably like I'm probably spending more hours overall on indie games just because there's so many of them that come out every week. And it's such a mixed bag. And I know why a lot of gamers are like, they wait for reviews and they wait for, opinions because, these games might be like $20 or whatever, so a fraction of a AAA. But the problem is that some of them are broken, some of them are dreadful, some of them are not like what they look like they're going to be or what they say they're going to be. So I know there's a lot of trepidation, and like these games, like there are hundreds of these games on the store every month. They're just like spewing out, and so it's so hard to find ones that are decent. And it is easier, obviously, if you're playing a lot of them. The good ones will stick out, but there are so many good ones. I think there that a lot of people just miss completely. The PlayStation and the Xbox store is just every day there's new stuff, and it just gets pushed further down. They don't bring stuff back. So my favorite indies, I suppose, this year. I'm not sure if you played any of these, Daryl, but feel free to ask about any of
We'll
these
see.
interest you. The recent Nostalgic Train, which is a really wonderful, it's a visual novel, but it's got a little bit of walking sim. It's a Japanese game, but it's all in English, the text, obviously. There's no spoken word in it, and it circles around this memory loop, basically, where you ride a train and then you get off and you basically go from sort of modern times back generations to look at how this story has affected this family. And it's kind of it's a very sad game and kind of a tragic story. Really beautiful little game, and just showing you, I suppose, what you could do with such a simple concept, which at the core is what an indie is. It's so blurred now with, more money coming in and
Yep.
A or B studios sort of maybe indie, but at a true indie essence. The next one, the Solitaire Conspiracy. Have you heard of this one?
I have heard of it. I think I've got it maybe in my wish list.
Yeah, I think you should bump it up if you like solitaire in particular.
Okay.
But it's got and also because you're starting to have a love, infatuation with FMVs as well.
Oh yeah.
So there's elements of that in this. This has got that Greg Miller, kind of funny dude, and he's the narrator or whatever else. And it's also you can see him, so there's video or whatever. It's a Mike Bithell game, so you've got to use your brain, I suppose, people.
Yep.
Unfortunately, but it's not. I did it, so you can use a small brain and you'll still get away with it. It is. You can play it as basic solitaire, but it gets more complicated. Like there's these, like the cards can fight each other a little bit, and so certain cards will go to the bottom, when you drop them on the top, which would never happen, obviously, in normal solitaire. It explains it all, but as I said, you can play it like normal if you want, and it goes through a series of missions, and it's telling this story, if you like, this spy story where you're up against Solitaire, and Solitaire is this, unknown figure of the head of the spy network, and you're as you finish each sort of chapter, you're getting a new deck, so you're getting more agents that come to you, and of course, you start with one deck, then there's 2, 3, and 4, and this sort of stuff. So it's probably only like a 3-4 hour game or whatever else, but it is super fun. Like the FMV stuff, a little cheesy, but the whole concept, if if you've played Solitaire before and you're like you want a bit of a fresher on it, it's such a fun concept. And if you are a bit of a skill gamer, there is actually there's a mode in it, a timing mode, like where you get like a 2 or 3 minutes and you've got to finish so many sets of hands, which is really challenging. So the base game is not
Yeah.
overly hard, but there's challenge there if you need it. This one, I don't know. This one, because I know you're a bit of a pony. So this one, Away,
Oh yeah.
Away, the survival series. Do you remember this?
It sounds familiar. Let me bring it up.
This one, I don't know, it was at least a year ago, might have been 2 years ago. They showed at one of their showcases.
Yes, yes.
It is a PlayStation exclusive.
That's
Yeah.
the flying squirrel one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it looked really good. Just unfortunately did not work out that way when they released it. They forgot to tell the
Right.
game. And it was a real shame because it starts off with the flying squirrel. It's awesome. And, graphically it's whatever. It's livable for an indie game. But it's really broken. And the only reason I put it in my list is that it's rare that you get a game where you just don't know how to do anything. And like nothing's explained, but the game, it just doesn't work. Like in parts it's linear, but there's no real markers for where you're supposed to go. You can fall through the side of the map. And it's just, I don't know. It's a testament to broken games on, I want to say Sony, but I know they exist on both systems. How it ever got released, I'm not sure. And such a shame it got released in that that way, because it is a really cool idea that you play as this bat and you're trying to reunite your family, whatever else. You've got the big animals, a bit of stealth, and this, and it's really close to being good, but it's not. And it's it's a really good case study, I suppose, if you're learning game design, why you shouldn't release something that's not ready. Because this company, and I know people are like, oh, well, just don't buy it. But the problem with this is if you follow games, you'll know who made this, or you'll write down who made it, and you probably will never buy another game of theirs because of what they've done here. And it's a real shame that it's a good idea. Whether they ran out of money or time or both, I don't know. But it's a shame, like an angel investor or someone couldn't say, here's a few million or whatever you need, take another year or two and make it, because I think they ruined the concept, unfortunately. But
that was one game that I was like, oh, flying squirrel game looks kind of neat. I thought that the graphics in the trailer looked pretty good, but when it came out and I read that it was broken, I was like, okay, I'll wait for them to patch it. And then I just never went back to it.
It's one of those weird things, because like we always talk about, oh, well, like it's a broken game, but it'll get better. Like Ubisoft, it's guaranteed that's what's going to happen. It'll be broken and it will get better over time. But there's a lot of games like that. But the problem with some games are that they can't be fixed. They're broken in the code in such a way that I think it's just, you have to start again. And I think this is one of those games that I think there's so much wrong with it that I don't think a patch, short of patching the whole game, which I know they've done on, some developers have done, there may be no way around that. So it's a real shame, that one. But it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, gotcha.
I don't know. I've got a couple more if you like for indie.
Man, you keep going, dude. Like,
okay.
You keep talking games, I'll jump in. Like, I've got a few I want to talk about, and when the time's right, I'll get there.
Good, because I've opened my book here, listeners. You can't see this. I have a bit of a problem, perhaps, of acquiring games. So as Darrell starts to list them, I'm going to be writing them down so that I can add them to my collection as well. That's what I like the most about talking
Absolutely
games. But another three I'll throw out for you. I think all three of these are interesting. You probably worthy of your time. The first one is Toem, Toem. It's a black and white minimalistic art style narrative walking sim with a lot of puzzle elements, like environmental puzzles, I suppose you could say. And the premise is you walk around taking photos of things in the environment or whatever, and it opens up as you've got enough photos. You open up into the next map or whatever. But it's a really cute game that. It probably is only 2 hours if you use a guide. I'm not sure. I haven't done that. But if you're working it out yourself, it's actually one of these like old school type games that'll probably take you 12 hours because it's not completely clear, and you're overdoing one thing over on this side of the map, and you just can't figure out how to go any further. So you're like, okay, I'll go back over to this side, and then while you're over there doing it, or 2 days later, it's in the back of your mind, and you go, oh, I know what I could do. I've got to try that. And there hasn't been a lot of games like that for me where I've, like 3 days later, I've been like, oh my God, why didn't I try picking up that thing or moving that? And so then I come back in and I try it, doesn't work. And I go, oh, okay. And then, a couple of days later, there's something. So that was a really good experience. Hoa, HOA, which is about I think almost everyone should play this if they have a PlayStation. Only play it on PS5. The PS4 version, not so great. It's about a 3-hour platformer, but very simplistic platforming. It's really beautiful. It's a really cute little story. You play as like this little butterfly thing. It's just a really nice, feel-good story. I think your kids would like that one, potentially, Darrell. And then one maybe for the adults. This came out last year, but I played it sort of this year, or early this year, Iris.Fall, which is, we had a bit of a wave at the start of the year of these games like Contrast. You remember Compulsion Studios? Yeah. So not Compulsion, but this idea of playing with shadows and, and light. And Iris Fall, it's a dark story that plays with light, and all the puzzles involve the light. They're really clever puzzles as well. And they make you think, but not so much that you need a guide. Perhaps for trophies you might. I think there might be missables. But if you're playing the game, you can get through it without bashing your head against the wall, but it won't be given to you, I suppose, if that makes sense. So a lovely experience.
I have that game. I just I haven't started it yet.
Yeah, it's about $20, and I don't know. I think I messaged you whenever, like maybe last year, and it was like $2 or something on the NA store for no reason. I'm sure it's not anymore, unfortunately, but
that's when I picked it up. I picked it up for like $2. Yep.
Yeah. And then one you should definitely play, although you'll have to play it on the Xbox. It is an exclusive there, at least at the moment, but it's on Game Pass, that wonderful thing with free games. The Artful Escape. I don't know. Have you tried this yet?
I have not, but I've heard a lot about it.
You'll love it because you're wailing on a guitar. Every time you jump, you hold the button and you
Yeah.
sort of float and wail on the guitar. And it's a rock opera as a game. It's only like 4 or 5 hours or so. Beautiful, punky art style. It's crazy. And the story is crazy too. It starts off normal and then it goes to the scene. There's an octopus in there as well. Wonderful. But the music in it is good. It's good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then the last one I'll throw out because I got to let you have a go because I'm taking over. I can
No, you're good.
hear it. This one is interesting. It definitely flew under the radar, and I don't like Metroidvania games for the premise that I don't like not knowing where I'm going, and that's what people like about Metroid games is that you don't really know where you're going, and you have to go backwards, and for some reason you can't get up that jump, but you will be able to later. And like, how are you supposed to know all this stuff? Like, I don't know, and it's very frustrating for me. So I avoid these games. Their maps are usually difficult to understand as well because they're sort of, flat maps, if you like, a bit like the Control situation, flat maps on vertical levels. And my small brain, it doesn't understand it. And I was listening to the R3 Sense podcast, and they were predominantly interested in, their top 100 games, looking at all sorts of games. But they also did a little bit at the start of each episode where they talk about what they were playing. And one of the guys there, Jonathan, we're like opposed gamers. Like, no way are we similar in anything we like. But he's raving about this game called Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Nights. And he's like, it's a Metroidvania, but it's not difficult like normal Metro. The map is good. The map highlights the different exits. It highlights when you can go to them if you're really stuck. And I was like, this sounds like a game that I could handle. And it's got roguelike elements as well. So, you die, but you don't reset. You get stronger every time. So you're not wasting progress or wasting time, and really dark art style or whatever. Some really like gorgeous music as well. So I was like, well, I'll give this Ender Lilies Quietus of the Nights a go on the Xbox, but I think it's on PlayStation too. And it's a really great game. And if you've tried to play something like Ori and the Blind Forest, which exceptional game, but it's a Metroidvania. If you can't handle the map, that game sucks, particularly the second one, because it's just difficult. This is like, I don't want to say babies first because it's not. There's RPG mechanics in this game. It's very involved, around 15 hours. Judge for yourself. But it's a really great game. And, if it were to come across your radar, I definitely suggest grabbing it. I think for me, it's my favorite indie game this year. It's just fantastic. So, yeah, that's enough.
So I'm sitting here going through my list, and I didn't have the best experience with indie games this year. And I actually didn't play, with the exception of Spam, a ton of indie games this year. I really, as I was reflecting through my list, I actually played a lot of big AAA titles, AA titles. But I got a couple of them that I kind of want to point out. One of which I don't think it qualifies as indie, but it's one of those bite-sized games that's been re-released through the Arcade Archives, and that is Sunset Riders. It was a Super Nintendo game. I think it would be considered AAA back in that day. 2D side scroll shoot 'em up, cowboys and Indians kind of thing. But man, it is so good. It is so incredibly good. I had an absolute blast. This is when it released on the PSN. I was like, this is a day one. My son and I sat there and played it together before school one day, and it just immediately took me back to that time. And nowadays, like a game like this comes out, and this is tiny. This is, it was such a big deal when I was a kid. Playing back through it now, as a small downloadable title, was awesome. So that was one that really stuck out to me as a game that I just really enjoyed it. And it would be considered, I mean, it's the equivalent of what we download for our indie games these days. An indie game that you turned me on to that unfortunately I haven't finished yet, but what I've played has been tremendously just well done, and I've had such a good time, is Visage.
Yeah.
That game has the wildest opening. Like, just that opening scene was like tone setting. It was really good. Absolutely. It nails atmosphere. The game is scary as crap.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's very, very cool. So that is one that I've got on my list to go back to. But it's not a game that I can play in a room with distractions or other people. Like, that's one of those, you put the headphones on and you go.
You know
Um,
what's great about that game? And like, I'm not sure how much you've played of it, but I was like, that is genuinely scary, that game, I think. Well, I think
yes.
it is, like you. And one of the things like with games are that always interests me is how games funnel you into forward progression. So, how much they hold your hand or they direct you where to go so that you can actually play the game. You're not just in this opening area
Right.
forever. And that's one of the few games where it doesn't really hold your hand, and it's not a spoiler, but the 3 chapters come off which item you sort of pick up in the house in the open level, and that differentiates which story path you go down, and you can go down any of the 3 story paths, I believe, from the beginning. And that's as far as I'll go, spoilers or whatever. And I thought like it's a really cool design. It's quite open or whatever, and it adds to what added to the tension for me and maybe the frustration. And it's so funny, like Cameron and Style and Anya Bro, they both played this game and they're like, it's not scary at all. You just, well, shit, the game is, it's no good. It's not good. It's not clear what you're doing. It's not blah, blah, blah. But then, I was thinking about it. I was like, well, I think it's scary. And then I was like, well, they're just sitting there with a video guide, Style, and you were
Right.
sitting there
Right.
with a video guide playing it. So, you knew which item you're picking up, you're following it along. So it really, I know you probably need a guide to finish it, whatever, to complete it, maybe. But it's one of those games where if you go in not knowing what the hell is going on, it's much better, I think. Like,
Oh, yes, absolutely. I said that on a recent show, maybe last week before, when I was talking about BioShock. How, like, most of the time when you're playing through a game with a guide, it'll spoil things for you, makes it less enjoyable. You don't get as much out of it. Whereas a collectible guide with BioShock, I was still really, really getting, the game. It's just it's such a good game, such a game. I had such a blast with it. Visage is a game that I chose not to use a guide on. That was a game that you actually had challenged me to play, and I went into it like you would any horror game: lights off, headset on, let's go. And I thought it was very scary. As a matter of fact, shout out to Tyler Owens, a friend of mine who he streams and he's played that game on stream, and we were conversating while he was playing it, and he was like, dude, this game's terrifying. This game is freaking terrifying. And he plays a lot of the horror games, enjoys all the Resident Evil stuff as well. And it just, to me, it really hit that same unexpected nature that PT did. When PT came out, you didn't know what you were doing. You know what to expect. And when crazy stuff started happening, it got you. And I could see where a guide would ruin that game.
Yeah. It's so funny when you talk about that, because I know the other horror-ish indie game you played, and I really want to play it, is this Song of Horror. And
Yes.
for some reason, I know it was a bit glitchy or whatever at the time or whatever, and I think it's good on PlayStation, maybe not on Xbox. There's something going on still with it somewhere. But the funny thing is it never goes, and like, I don't want to come across as a cheap bastard because I buy whatever anyway, but for some reason I have a mental block on this game because it never goes on sale. And I know that it could be glitchy, but my bigger problem is that you said the characters die. So I'm scared that I'm going to get 10 minutes in and that'll be my experience. And I'm like, like I've bought games, worse games or, shorter games for more, and it's been fine. But I have a real mental hang up on that Song of Horror for some reason, but I do want to play it.
It's funny because that was another one I wanted to bring up, and that's a game that I didn't finish it because it was broken. And by the time the developers got back with me and said it was patched and good to go on PlayStation, I had already kind of moved on. It's again still downloaded to my console, and it is on my list of things to do for next year, especially a spam-free, celibate year. But it's definitely what I'm going to go back to. I even ordered the physical edition just because I loved the first several hours that I played of the game. And it's the old school Resident Evil style, fixed cameras, third person camera. You can the characters run around the room. You got to find the puzzle pieces, but the tension, not knowing what's on the other side of the door, is so good. And then they took puzzles that you would solve in other survival horror games, and the outcome, and they flipped them on their head, and they caused me to die. And it was awesome. It was just like they broke the formula. They knew I knew what I was supposed to do, and they did the opposite, and they got me. And that is a game that, like, my initial impressions of that game is fantastic. It was a great experience. Again, it's when you'll be hearing me talk about this one a lot, and especially the first quarter of the year, because I've got a whole slew of horror games indie horror games that I'm going to be burning through, especially since, hey, that's a spam-free year. So that's another one I really enjoyed, and I'm very, very. I think that one's got them probably the most potential out of most of the games that I've played.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I want to throw one more because you mentioned that Sunset Arcade Archives thing. Thing. I don't know if you played this one or not. Lucky Slinger. It technically a spam plat in that you only need to play the first 2 levels, but it's very similar to that game. But it actually has like a much longer. Well, I don't know if it's longer because I couldn't finish the other one, but it has a good I think 8 chapters. If you want to play the whole game, you might like that. If you like that, they're very similar.
Lucky Slinger.
Yeah. As I said, the plat
like
is about a quarter of the game, but then you can keep going, and it's I really enjoyed that game. Yeah, it was fun.
If I play this, get the platinum, and had a good time, then I can stop there.
Yes, that's right.
So I got one more indie game that I think that you and I both have a quite an affinity towards. When it comes to horror games, this is the creme de la creme, the top of the mountain. There are no games. There are a few games, probably buggier and glitchier and uglier than this game. And most games, the devs know most people only play the beginning, and a lot of times you'll put a game in, and it's like, okay, this is polished, this looks good, and things get a little more bland, a little more assets get reused. You start to see patterns, and games maybe taper off towards the end, but none really hit that home like An Evil Existence does.
How good was the end of that game with the flamethrower?
Oh my gosh. The old lady with the chainsaw.
Oh, chainsaw. Yeah.
Yes, it was so broken. And the cemetery fight where you had to stab that guy or hit him with the wooden crosses like 100 times.
That's right. But the funny thing was that game it was a Resident Evil 7 ripoff too, because it literally had that door scene where you stand, before you go in and the doors open a bit and it's black. Oh, it's wonderful.
Oh, even the old guy when you open the door, the man that punches you in the face and then drags you off. Like, it was unashamedly a ripoff, and it was awesome for it. That one was awesome. There's another one that's very similar to that. This one I thought I would have had the platinum in much faster than I still don't have the platinum in. It's called Dissection. Okay, Dissection. It is it's the same assets.
Yeah.
It's like the same assets as that game. You're in a mansion. There's a big bad, a threat that's kind of in the room that kind of chases you around, and you have to find keys to get into different rooms. I've only got 9 out of the 22 trophies. So this is one that my daughter and I are playing together. And my kids, they like horror games. I love horror games. I mean, obviously I talk about them all the time, but we have found some horror games that we can play together. Now, what that usually means is they're a bit more janky, very indie, and they're they are where they are. This is one of them that I'm playing with my kids whenever they're ready, and the sound design is not evenly, the sound's not evenly distributed throughout the game. So when things happen, it can be obnoxiously loud. And the pattern that the big bad runs through, it's kind of all over the place. It's very interesting. That's another one though. But there's certain games that you can tell these Unity assets are being reused in these indie games for some of these horror stuff. And that's another one that it reminded me of. Not a good game. All right, not a good game. But
it's like watching I went through a lot of phases this year, but I went through this phase of watching really dodgy horror movies, like
Yes.
that are just they're supposed to be funny or whatever. Did you know Ubisoft made a horror film? It's Werewolf something.
Werewolves Within?
Yeah, it's dreadful, but it's
Yeah.
funny dreadful. And there was another one I watched before that. I forget they're all forgettable, but they were so bizarrely bad that But I think they're supposed to be like that. That's what you're supposed to laugh at them as well as their horror. And it's fun to have games like that because, as you said with Visage, a lot of I'm not a horror game player because it's a bit intense for me, but a lot of those games are really intense. So to have these like games where they're like maybe there's like a jump scare here or there, but it's sort of so ridiculous as well. It's such a great balance for that B grade cheesiness.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that attracts me to that genre is that I love B grade horror movies. Speaking of, so there is, okay, I got to tell, this is perfect place to talk about it. Years and years ago, when we first started Ninja Loot, I found a movie called Quarantine. It has the actress from the show Dexter.
Mm-hmm.
I forget her name, but she's the main actress in this movie. And I believe this is pre-Dexter days. This might be when she was doing Dexter. I'm not 100% sure, but I discovered the movie. It's called Quarantine. It's like a found footage movie. So like it's in first person, shaky camera kind of thing. And it's like a zombie outbreak that kind of takes place in an apartment complex. And the whole movie is filmed inside the apartment complex. Some of the best horror out there. Like, is it scary? Kinda, but it's also like just well done. Like they made the most of the opportunities they had with the budget they had. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I watched it tons of times, really, really loved it. It has a great ending, just really cool. So I was going through the various streaming services the other night looking for Amazon Prime has like some of the campiest, like worst B grade, C grade horror movies. And I randomly stumbled across Quarantine 2. I had no idea this movie existed. It came out in 2011. So I watched it. I was like, oh, I got to watch this. This is a follow up to one of my favorite films. Mm-hmm. It's not a found footage movie, but it is a B grade horror movie. And it's actually really, really good. So if you decide to dip back into some of those, Quarantine and Quarantine 2. Now, Quarantine 2 is not near as good as Quarantine 1, but it's a different style film, and what they use their budget on really worked. Like the actual infected people, their movement, their actual makeup. It's done really well. It's really cool. I really, really enjoyed that. And just now that we're talking about B grade horror, which is like my favorite thing in the world, I'm like, yes, Quarantine 2, gotta watch them. They're really good. So
on the list.
All right. So throughout the year, I played various indie games, and I played things that just weren't good, and I've kind of called those out. Yeah. One of which being 12 Minutes. Wasn't a huge fan of that game. A little divisive with the endings and things. Did you play 12 Minutes?
Yeah, I did. The game I think it's fair to say the game's a mess. Like the designer, I thought it wasn't what I was expecting to start with, but that was my fault. Going in blind, I'd build up a different thing, but I thought the whole thing was a bit of a mess, the way it was put together. And I bounced off it. I just did one ending, and that was enough for me. And like, I understand there's an element of like old school games where you have to like experiment to get the endings, but I found the loop frustrating to break out of. And I didn't think that logically, and from having, listen to people that have finished it or whatever else, and the way they talk, it doesn't sound like logically there was a clear path through that game either. So either you had to make some huge lateral leaps, or you had to cheat and use a guide. And I think that I think it's a game that was clearly overhyped, perhaps, and perhaps it wasn't what any of us were expecting. I think in the long run.
I agree. That one, I was looking forward to that game. I played it on Game Pass, which, I know I give Game Pass a lot of heat for things on the show, but I'm still a subscriber, still use it. And that was a game that I was looking forward to. And I didn't even go for the 100% on it because I got so frustrated with it. And there's just things about it that the same things about that frustrate me in a normal point and click adventure. Like there's no logical way you get from point A to point B in these games, and they're almost designed to follow a guide with, and I didn't enjoy it. So I kind of wanted to point that out. And I kind of just want to see if you had played it, what you thought, because I didn't love that game, but I'm sitting here looking at it on the PlayStation Store, thinking about doing it again.
They're really weird because, part of the push for that was Annapurna, obviously, and they're just the publisher or whatever else. But they're more than that's fair enough to say about some publishers, but unfortunately, they're more than that because they also fund a lot of studios and they bring and work with very small studios to fruition. And their stuff is if you watch some of their films like Kajillionaire and a few of the others, they're really divisive. You're either going to like it or you're going to go, this is fucking ridiculous. There's no middle ground with a lot of their works, and I think their games have been fairly safe, if you will. They've followed game structure. Like the Artful Escape, they were behind as well, hugely behind, and that it plays like a game or whatever else. I think 12 minutes is perhaps what they're doing more with their films, which is sort of this niche noir art house experimental, and I don't think it worked there. And I think that's why a lot of people got frustrated with that game, because they assumed, oh, well, everything they touch is really good, but everything they've made, even Kentucky Route Zero, which is a bit of a stretch for a game, a narrative, it's very good, but a stretch. They haven't made anything that quite like that, I don't think, yet. And I think that perhaps is more what if you're used to their film over, then you would be maybe less surprised. It doesn't mean it makes allowances for it, but they're a progressive company. So I think, not everything they make is going to, into the future is going to get such a good reputation, particularly if you don't like, the bizarre or maybe pushing the boundaries a little. And of course, sometimes things like 12 minutes happen when you do that. It just doesn't work, especially in a game. A film you can get away with because a passive member can sit there, and even if they don't understand, the film will continue. So to the point they can understand. But a game, as you say, there's no lateral way to get there. So it's an issue perhaps they're going to have to deal with once they move away from really strict narrative to incorporating more gameplay.
Absolutely. Now, since you mentioned film and games, it's only fair that we actually bring up some of these visual novel. It's not visual novel. Jesus, yes. FMV
good
games.
For them.
It's been a good year for me to buy them. I tell you that. And I made this double-edged sword. It's not a mistake, but it's also not the best path. Is getting my wife involved on these. Because now she's like, well, you can't play them without me. And then trying to get her in the mood to play these games with me is harder than trying to get her in the sack, if you know what I mean. So we started. So I played Nightbook with my kids, and that was a phenomenal experience. We had so much fun, and I think you had made the comment that was like a COVID game. You could tell that they had filmed and edited it, and but they did so good. And I don't know that anyone or everyone listening to this will go play Nightbook and enjoy it as much as I did. But to me, it nailed what it wanted to do. It had a little bit of the supernatural in it. It had some cool story paths, some interesting characters. They even brought in, a fairly large actor in there. And I really enjoyed it. And it just, for me, it hit at the right time. So then I played She Sees Red, which not as good, still enjoyable. A little easier to platinum than some of these games that I've played. But overall, an interesting game. And I'm very drawn to this genre. And then you had recommended I Saw Black Clouds. So this time I played the first game with my, Nightbook with my children. Now I've played some of the old ones like The Bunker, Night Shift, things like that. But I feel like those were a little more point and clicky. At least The Bunker was point and clicky, and you had to interact more. Whereas these others have relied more so on you just making the decisions and letting the film play out. So then I was like, well, I'll do I Saw Black Clouds with my wife. So we have beaten the game multiple times. We've done some of the different endings, the different routes. I think we've done 3 of them now. And we've only got a few more trophies to go. But she doesn't want to move on to the next one until we 100% this one, which I think is amazing. The fact that I took a woman who rolled my eyes and told me I was a nerd for all the games I play and buy, more so for buying. And then now she's like, "Oh no, we got 100% this before we can move on to the next thing,"
Yeah.
which I think is awesome.
Isn't it ironic? You're one of the biggest game buyers in America, and you live with a completionist. It's
I
a
know.
shocking. She's going to be
Like,
devastated when she realizes your profile is garbage.
oh my gosh. What's awesome is you and Rick both recommended Bloodshore.
Oh, it's wonderfully
And
janky.
when I read the premise to her, she started smiling. She's like, "Oh yeah, we're doing that." And I thought that was amazing. I'm like, "Here we go. I got her." So all the things I played this year, what's really hit indie wise, what's really hitting, I guess home was really being great here is these FMV games. And I mean, I purchased, I think 7 or 8 of them. Like, just I was like, "Oh, let's go buy all of them." So anything that was, I would click on a Wales interactive game, and I bought it. I bought like one wild one I haven't played yet, but it's and you might have played this, and I actually want to pick your brain on it. It's a Japanese FMV. Let me go to my collection real quick. Let me pull up what I purchased. I know this is riveting audio here, but purchase date. Here we go. Like the trailer looks wild, and I can't remember the name of it. So I bought the Shape Shifting Detective because you said that was a good one. I haven't played that one yet. I'm a little disappointed in myself. I bought Bloodshore. Again, I haven't played that one yet. I Platinum She Sees Red. Good Lord, I bought a lot of games. I just keep scrolling through.
It's not Death Comes True, is it?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. So
have you played that one yet?
Yeah, I have. Interesting game. So it is a Japanese FMV that was localized. They bypassed the main I suppose Switch's mainstream, and it went to the Switch first, and it's been on the Switch for a few years, and it didn't look like it was coming across at all. So I played it on the Switch, but it did come across like last year, I think, to PlayStation. I don't think it's on Xbox yet. And it's have you played it yet or not?
No. I could actually start it tomorrow. Really.
Yeah. So. Probably not one for your kids. Some of the subject
definitely
material.
Not one for her. Not one for her either. She won't do anything crazy in Japanese. So
I think you'll like it because the horror, it's like it's a bit of gore horror as well or whatever, but it's mixed with that Japanese like one of the great things about playing any type of Japanese game is that you just never really know what's going to happen next. At any time, anything could happen in a really good Japanese game, and this is the same way. Like it's not a long game. It's like an hour, I think it takes for one run or something, probably less than that or whatever. But there's a bit of divergence within the story, but it's sort of like it's a bit surreal as well. Like it's did you watch it's a poor analogy, but that Korean Squid Game? I don't know if you watched that.
No, I watched a Korean film called Parasite, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's similar. Yeah. Right. It's that sort of quirkiness, or whatever else. It looks a little bit of idol culture and pop culture within Japan as well. Touches on that, so it's definitely worth playing. It's different to the Wales one.
Well, it's downloading now, and actually, I had it downloaded on my PlayStation 5 because I was going to play it a while back, but then decided to put all the FMV games on my PS4 in my bedroom so that my wife and I could play them. And then now she doesn't want to move on until we complete 100% I Saw Black Clouds, but she doesn't want to do a guide. So here, this is how we're having to do things. We're cuddled up together in the bed. We're watching the game. I've got the controller in one hand, and then I've got my phone beside me with the text guide brought up. Every so often, I'll just kind of glance at it. And then I may or may not let that influence the decisions that I suggest. And we just kind of go from there. So we've gotten several of the endings ourselves. But there's a lot of those Wales games I'll be playing with her. This one will not interest her at all. So I know we're going to do Bloodshore next, and then I want to do The Wine. So I think you told me you played that one as well.
Yeah. I haven't actually played that yet. Maybe we'll get to that at the same time. But
there you go.
Yeah.
So
it's a solid. Yeah. I mean, this year's been amazing for the FMVs, and it's funny you mentioned that I Saw Black Clouds because I think out of all the FMVs I've played, and played, I think, all the console ones now. I know there's many more on PC. It's the first one that has a proper split narrative. A lot of the FMVs, they funnel into roughly the same ending, or a slight divergence in the final set of scenes, whereas the Black Cloud actually runs like from the middle, depending on your choices, like a 4 ending, so a complete split narrative, which I can make getting all the trophies a bit of a nightmare without a guide for you. But I thought that was really good. I mean, it suffers, unfortunately, in that it was filmed in, I want to say German, but I could be wrong. And the dubbing was not good when I played it. Maybe it's better now, just how it is. But if that doesn't worry you or whatever else, I thought it was really quite good. There's some graphic scenes in it or whatever else, maybe more for adults. But I thought that's a good example of where this genre sort of is. And I think Nightbook is really good. It's a nice, tight experience, as you said. It's like a good entry-level FMV. Bloodshaw, have you played Bloodshaw yet? Or not?
No, not yet.
It's absurd.
Downloaded and ready to go.
I look forward to hearing what your wife will love it. So it's a real play on where we're at as a society. I think it's a bit of a loose FMV as to whether it's any good or not, but that's interesting. And then perhaps like out on you mentioned Death Comes True is a bit of a fringe one, but the other one I think you mentioned the other day to me, Dark Knights with Poe and Munro, and
yes,
this is so Poe and Munro were first in the shape-shifting detective. A good FMV holds structure throughout the game. This one, Linda and Tim Cowles, they separated from Wales. They put these out themselves, and it's really evident that they have a different direction. The narrative is like they're more interested in playing with the narrative, and there's not always text options in this game, so movement options as well. So there's a bit more to it. But the further you get on, the game gets weird, like really weird. And it's one of those things where you finish and you're like, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here anymore. And I thought perhaps it turned into a bit of a horror. And then I thought, well, I'm not even sure exactly what's happened at the end. So it's one of those games where you're like, no, not like you're left questioning, but I'm just like, there's so much here going on, I'm not really sure. So it's a good FMV, definitely, but it's like one you really have to concentrate and follow because the threads are quite diverse. And not until you've played it multiple times, in the third act in particular, do you start to understand all the diverging paths. There are different stories, but they all funnel into the one ending, which makes it difficult to understand the ending until you've seen all the paths, if that makes sense, even though you'll have seen it. Yeah, so worth seeing, but it's I could see why people would not like that one compared to some of the others.
So that was what was interesting about I Saw Black Clouds is whenever the first time we saw the two girls captured in the basement, like we left our friend, let them take her, and then we moved on and ran away, and we just thought they're like, wow, this is like a sex trafficking thing.
Yeah.
But then you go back and play it more and you find out that that's not the case at all. And so I thought that was it was very interesting, kind of the way it played out, and we've enjoyed these. This has been good for us. So, but unfortunately, there's a new season of Love Island out, so it's been hard, man. It's been hard to get her to play.
We've covered. It's so funny because my whole life there are certain things that I've avoided. The Sound of Music being the most predominant in the movie. I'll never see it.
Gotcha.
It dug my heels in. But one of the other things we missed out on was Game of Thrones, and never really held much interest, despite the fact that it's probably perfect series for a gamer, or definitely a fantasy RPG or JRPG style gamer. And we finally started it like a week ago, and I deliberately do not watch shows with my partner for the reason, Darrell, that you have to watch it together and be in the same place, which means if you want a game for 4 hours and they want to watch it, then can't, you have to come to a common ground or whatever, which means you have to watch the TV instead. So, and you can't catch up or go back or forth. So anyway, we started to watch this together, which is great. It's a great, we won't go into it, but it's great or whatever else. But yeah, it's in the back of my mind, like doing anything with, because I'm lucky my partner hates games, but enjoys TV. So, but and TV at a pace, like 2 episodes a night is enough. And I'm like, this is going to take us fucking ever.
Dude, I made the biggest mistake of showing her that I had all these FMV games. Like, I was like, oh, babe, we could do this forever. Because my thing was like, let's get rid of the TV watching. Yeah, and let's get into TV interacting. And the thing, and it all stands the same for her. She's going to sit there with her phone in her hand, playing on Facebook, texting her friends, and then she's going to ask me 1,000 questions on what she missed when she looked away, and I'm going to be popping trophies. To me, it doesn't get any better than that. Maybe every now and again, I might get lucky and get a platinum. Mine out the gutter, mine out the gutter.
Somebody's scoring.
Yeah, exactly. Where it counts. So I was like, this is great. And then now this no, I can't. We can't move on. We didn't finish the last one. We didn't do everything. I'm like, okay, well, let's play it then. Well, no. I got new episodes of The Bachelor, and there's a new season of Love Island out, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're killing me. So, but I'm sure
it's so funny. I mean, we're detracting here. It's so funny though, but like in gaming, I like to have like 20, 30 games open at any time, like like playing in different sections. It doesn't bother me at all, narrative, whatever. But in TV shows or books, I can only handle one at a time. My partner's the opposite. Is like he's got shows going that he hasn't watched since 2 years ago that it's like halfway through in the Netflix, and you get like, what the fuck's going on? Oh, I'll pick it up. It's fine. It's 6 books on the side. I'm like, this drives me insane. Meanwhile, you have all these games. It's so bizarre that different media, you can be in different places. But
absolutely.
That would drive me insane, your wife. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Oh my gosh. So this is what she does, right? So she sits there, she's watching one show. It ends, she goes to the next episode of the next show. It ends, and then I'm like, okay, good, finally, now it's my turn. Oh, no. I've got to watch Law & Order SVU and the Special Crimes Unit tie-in show because I got to know what Elliot Stabler's doing whenever Olivia is doing this. I'm just like, you're killing, but all while not even watching the TV.
Yeah,
she's playing on her phone. But then I'm judging her hard. I'm like, this is crazy. What are you doing? But then I go in my room and I've got the PlayStation going on. I've got the Vita in front of me for any time that I get in a spot where, okay, this is happening, this is loading, this is whatever. And then I've got like a show going on my laptop. It's a guide on my phone or my iPad. So
it's efficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
But look, I'm going to tack on a couple of games because those I have those FMVs in my narrative category. I've only got 3 categories, so you basically you attack them all. So the only other couple in that category I had that I don't think you would have heard of, but you might like, Hitchhiker, a mystery game. It's called available on everything or whatever else. It's really cool. It's a passive sort of game in that you literally a hitchhiker. You're sitting in the seat, and a different person. There's like I think 6 chapters or something, and it's a different person driving the car, and they have their story that you sort of learn. They talk to you as you're riding, and you can move things around the car. But predominantly, it's about picking text choices and listening to their story. And it starts off because you've got to play it in a linear fashion with the chapters. Starts off very normal, what you'd expect, but as the game goes on, they start to say things. It's like there'd be a pack of nuts on the seat, and he'll be telling you about his son. And it's like, have some nuts. And then anyway, too. I notice you haven't had nuts. Have some nuts. And like, all these sort of things. And he's trying to poison you or whatever. Like there's all this weird shit going on as well. In the background, of course, if you have the nuts, something happens. And like but they get more and more macabre and more bizarre as they go on, these stories. About a 3 or 4 hour experience. Very easy. I think it's a platinum, otherwise 100%. Very easy completion because you doesn't matter what text choices you make, so you can just enjoy the story. You get it all story based, but it's one of these games that starts off, you're like, oh yeah, I know what this is, and it just goes more and more sort of like against the grain, I suppose. I thought it was a great experience. Hitchhiker.
It's called Hitchhiker.
A mystery game, yeah. And then have to throw a little Life is Strange, True Colors. I thought it was great. We don't need to get into it, but there is a really good. The new one is good. Not necessarily to play the other ones, but more in line with number 2, which I know you're not a big fan of, so perhaps not a game for you.
If they say hella a bunch, I'm in.
You're on the right track. But the last one, and I want to ask you about this because I think you're going to play it. I know you've had a lot of trouble, I think, with Amazon in acquiring this game or something. I think it was this one. But Dark Pictures anthology, House of Ashes. Did you get to it yet?
I have it. No. I'm trying to line it up to where I play it right before we do our deep dive. That was supposed to be our December deep dive. And then, I didn't have my copy until December started. And so I got it, but then Kalai was going to be out the entire month. She would be the person that I'm doing the deep dive with. So that one's going to be in January. So that's going to be happening in January for sure.
Well, I look forward to that because I mean, I know you like those series anyway. They're good. They're good. And
oh yeah, I really do enjoy
this. This is a little different, but the reason I want to indulge here a little bit with this game, so I decided, to self-gift myself for Christmas because Darrell, when you don't have children and you're in your 40s, you have to self-gift because nobody else does.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I bought this. I thought it's time for a nice gaming chair, and I was like, well, I don't know, what I want. And like the price range is huge in chairs. You can get from, nothing to ridiculous. And I was like, well, I want something that's, lasts more than a year and it's, solid or whatever else. And so I had no idea and whatever else. So we went out to this game shop out in the West that sort of sells peripherals and chairs and all this sort of shit. And the guy was like, he could tell a Mark had walked into the store, obviously. And he was really good. He's like, so these are your basic chairs, but you don't need something like this. You need this chair as a number one. And I'm like, clearly I do. And anyway, but also the chairs are like a total wank fest gimmick, so I had to have it. And so it's a really nice chair. It's an X-Racer, I think they're called, X-Rocker, I should say, sorry. So it's a nice chair, solid or whatever else, fixed base or whatever else. But the real catch of this chair, Darrell, is that it's Bluetooth and you plug it into the wall. It has speakers underneath and speakers behind your head in the chair, and amazing. The chair vibrates. Now, I'm not sure how it syncs up with the game, but it does, because I have it running Bluetooth through the TV, not the system, so you can. And I was playing this Dark Pictures, and every time there's a jump scare, the chair starts shaking. It's fucking awesome. And then just randomly, too. Like, you can be playing a game like Assassins, nothing's happening, and the chair will start shaking. So it's a wonderful experience. And I highly recommend, if you just want to blast some money away for a joke, but have fun. These X-Rockers, I'm sure they're probably everywhere in the US where they're made or whatever. But yeah, it's a really good thing. And I never thought, I thought it would be a gimmick, jokes aside. But for those sort of games, it's really immersive, having the sound come right from behind your head and underneath you as well, like a cinema. So it's very cool experience. Yeah, you should definitely look. You've got everything else. You might as well get one of these as well.
So, and the area that I play predominantly, my PS5, it's in this little open area upstairs, but it's not the size of a full room. As a matter of fact, I measured the entire upstairs today because I'm going to get new flooring, and I was like, well, I gotta figure my square footage. So I did the math, and my little area that I'm in is actually smaller than the smallest bedroom in the house, which is fine because I bought a creative computer sound system, right? But I have it ran into my PlayStation and stuff, and it's got a little 8-inch subwoofer, and it sits right up against the wall, and so it vibrates the wall. So when I'm playing, the area that I'm in is more narrow. It's kind of long and narrow, and so whenever there's a lot of bass and a lot of like explosions and vibrations, whatever, it like resonates in this little cove that I'm in. And so I'm like, this is the perfect spot for gaming because like the sound is just like it's amazing in here.
Yeah.
And so that's what I need. I just need to add that to my arsenal, a vibrating chair. So that,
you do. You're just sort of holding on. You're going, shit, I'm riding the game and the chair. It's wonderful. It's wonderful experience.
I don't want to leave over here.
No, I don't. But the funny thing is, I've used it twice plugged in, and now I look at it and go, I don't think I'm going to plug you in today, just in case. So, but it works fine. Plugged in, not plugged. It's it's a good one. I think it'll be good for if I ever get the balls to go back to Resident Evil 8. Forward to it.
Well, the good thing about that one is it opens up and it gets more action based, so you don't have to be scared forever. Now, Resident Evil 7, that one stays pretty much on par for how you start.
That is true. Now, look, my next category I'll whip through because I know you have no interest in this at all, but I obviously spend. I seem to oscillate. Like it's every second year I get back into racing games in a big way, and I think because we had more time this year, I spent a shitload of time in racing games. Although I know you've been recently playing Wreckfest.
You'll be surprised the amount of racing games I'm playing right now.
Now I want to ask you first about that. Just a trophy question. Why not? Did you boost those 20 online wins, sir?
No, actually.
So you got a bit of skill.
Well, I'm playing with my kids, so we just played online together. So,
you're not playing general. Okay.
No. So basically, what we're doing is we got online, and I'm assuming I have that trophy. Let me look.
I thought you did.
It's very possible. So I've got reach rank 10, collect the vehicles, regional juniors champion. Yeah. Oh yeah, win 20 multiplayer events. I did that one naturally with my kids because I'm playing on PS5, but I'm playing the PS4 version because I'm going to do the PS5 version next. And my oldest is playing on his PS5, and that's my primary. And then my youngest, he's playing on his PS4, but that's also my primary. So we're all three playing the same digital copy of it. As long as I'm the primary on both those two consoles, they can access my library. So a nice little hack there, guys, if you're listening. So we're playing it together. So we've been doing like just destruction derbies like crazy, just having a good time, and playing as the bus. I bought a bunch of the DLC, but yeah, we've been playing. I'm actually playing Wreckfest as we're talking right now, so having a good time.
Okay. Well, look, as I said, I'll whip through these, but maybe we'll touch on one of them because one of them I think might interest you, perhaps.
Okay.
So I've only got one word for most of these games, not to bore your audience either. So Art of Rally, it's a yes. Dirt 5 is a maybe. NASCAR 21 Ignition is a definite no. Yield, don't do it. Game is fucking dreadful. Virtual Surfing is interesting. Ride 4 is too hard. WRC 10 is the best racing game I've played this year. Gear Club Unlimited 2, the Switch, is the most content I've played this year, which is a surprise. Riders Republic is the most interesting and surprising game I've played this year, perhaps the most fun, if not the best. Forza Horizon 5, the most overrated, unfortunately. I think it's a wonderful... Well, it's a wonderful if you don't play Forza games, but they're all the same, unfortunately. Like it's a really good game, don't get me wrong. But the problem with Horizon games are that they're good when they come out. They're way better in 2 years when all the rest of the contents come out as well. Gotcha. And that's what will happen with that game. So normally I put in like 30 hours, which I've done. I've finished loosely everything already. And then I'll come back in 2 years. I'll probably spend another 100 hours because there'll be so much more stuff added as the game goes. So it's really good. Nothing wrong with it, but I noticed IGN gave it their game of the year, and I was like, well, it's a big call this year for some of the stuff that's come out. But it is whatever. But the one that I wanted to mention is this Hot Wheels Unleashed, the Micro Machines game by Milestone, always a dicey racing game publisher and developer. But the reason I want to bring it up is like it's a ridiculously fun game that actually is a lot harder than I was expecting. The plat will be quite the challenge, but they brought out this wonderful DLC. It's all Batman. You get Batman cars, all the characters you can drive Batman cars, Joker cars, woman or Harley Quinn car, all this stuff. And then they've put this little themed, I think there's like 12 or 13 races in the Batman little world as well as Micro Machines. So it's actually...
I'm going to have to do that.
It's a good, I mean, you can get through it. The time trials are really tough. So if you're looking for a challenging racing platinum, there's definitely some challenge, there's some grind, and you don't need to be worried by the microtransactions because you don't have to participate to play the game or the platinum, but it's actually a surprisingly good game, and it's not, I think it's like a half price game, so perhaps my best racing game.
My wish list is getting bigger and bigger today.
It's you'll love it for the Batman stuff, I think.
Absolutely.
you might. I think that Riders Republic, I don't know, I don't think you probably played Steep. I
did.
Yeah, Anaheim or wherever it was, the Ubisoft studio that did that one. This is like, if you like Steep, you're going to love this game. It's like Steep with the skiing, the snowboarding, the rocket wings, plus adding BMX, plus adding some other crazy shit. The wingsuit is back. It's an evolved thing. Like Ubi, whether you like them or not, they do these sort of open world games incredibly well. And the matchmaking is really good. You can do races with up to 65 people, which is just carnage. As you can imagine, or whatever else. And it's one of these rare games that's cross-platform, so you can play cross-platform with PS5 and PC, Xbox PC. So there's always plenty of players to get the matches started. Yeah, it's quite,
That's good. Do you have any other racing games you want to call out? Because I've got a few.
No, that was basically all of them. Yeah. What have you got? I'm interested.
Well, like you said, I go through years where I might not play a racing game for 2 or 3 years, and then I'll just be like, oh, that's what I'm into right now. So Wreckfest has been the mainstay. My boys and I have had a blast with Wreckfest. That's a definite platinum. Then I'll turn around and I'll go for the platinum on PS5 as well. I don't know. I don't know if it auto pops, and I kind of don't want to find out because I'll be very tempted to do it. But I've gone back in time and been, my son, oddly enough, came up the other day. He goes, "Hey, can I download Need for Speed Payback?" I'm like, "Yeah, 100%." I was like, "Play all the Need for Speeds. They're great." We ended up settling on Wreckfest instead. But then I was like, man, I haven't haven't played Need for Speed, and shout out to Gareth. He's been our team captain for GTTSC. He was like, "Hey, if you want to do the Need for Speed Most Wanted trophies on the Vita, I'll boost them with you." I was like, "Absolutely," but unfortunately, I lost my game save when my memory card died, so I had to start the game over. And I'm enjoying it. I'm like, I've got actually, I got a grip for my Vita and some new little thumbstick covers, and it's like a brand new machine. And so I've been chipping away at some Need for Speed Most Wanted on the Vita. I thoroughly enjoy that game. I think it's great. But the next racing game that I've been playing that probably took me by surprise and I really hate that I waited this long, but is Mod Nation Racer Road Trip for the Vita.
Wow.
That's an old one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever played any of the Mod Nation Racer games, but it's good. It's very enjoyable. It's got some of the best drift mechanics out of any of the racing games I've played recently. And essentially, I just drift the whole match. I mean, the whole race. I've been playing it on my brakes. And granted, the platinum's unattainable now because of the online trophies being shut down. But I've been chipping away at it, and I'm having a great time. I've gotten some decent trophies off of it. Granted, the more rare stuff I won't be able to get because of they're attached to the online. But I've been playing those 3 racing games pretty consistently, and I did download Need for Speed Payback because I'm gonna jump into that one here soon as well. So I've really enjoyed them. And granted, I haven't tried Forza Horizons out. I tend to lean towards the more arcadey stuff. Granted, I know Horizons is the more arcadey of the two, but everyone said that one was really good. So I was like, yeah, I'll give it a whirl, although I haven't jumped into it yet.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a look. And it's like I think what they release, like, it's clever. They release the game or whatever, and it's the game of service in a way that doesn't cost more, but you're gonna add more content with expansions, and they will cost more. But things will come down. They have a car racing pass. So you buy that, you get more cars over time. So it's an overtime game that will fill out. But yeah, it's good. It's like a racing game for people that don't play racing games, and it's very clever. Because the majority of people don't play racing games. So that's the game you should be making. But it's so funny, the reason, like, I don't know why you drop in and out of racing games, but the reason I do is that I get to the end of the year and I'm like, shit, I spent a lot of time playing racing games this year. Because when you play like in between sim and arcade, like, because I don't like full sim either, it's all good while things are going well until you hit a wall, whether it be a time trial or a difficult event or whatever else. And that can suck up serious time. And you don't realize at the time because you're just one more lap, 4 hours, like, oh, fuck this. And, I've made no progress. And so, next week I come back for an hour. And they can suck up a lot of time, like this Hot Wheels that sucked up a ton of time for me, which is fun or whatever. But you don't, like, if you were playing a narrative game, you'd realize, I think. But these racing games, they do that. They just suck up that time in a fun way. But I think you need to, that's for me why I stop every year or so and go, okay, no more racing games for a while. Because you just, you're putting 50 or 60 hours into this thing, as well, which you don't realize.
I used to play all the racing games as they came out, the different Need for Speed Undergrounds, Project Gotham Racing. I dabbled in a little Gran Turismo, but those were always just too much for me. I even actually played, my first NASCAR game was on the PC at my aunt and my uncle's house. They had NASCAR like 2000, I think it was. And it was the greatest racing game in the world because you could turn around backwards and then you could just wreck all the cars.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun. And it was one of those things where they didn't dock you. You get a little emblem that says, hey, you're going the wrong way. Hey, you're going the wrong way. And so I would just hours and hours of just going through and wrecking cars. I had a blast. And I don't know, these past few years, the Need for Speed reboot, I think it was the one that had a lot of the FMV acting in it and stuff. You remember that one?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That was the last racing game I played. And I was like, this is cringe. I thought that the acting in it was really bad. And I thought it was just, a lot of the racing games got into this open world aspect, and I kind of wanted a little more structure. I kind of want to be like, let me just go and do, like, I love the Burnout games. Burnout Paradise, Burnout Revenge was really my favorite, but But those games were cool. You give me an objective, let me go do the race, let me go do the wrecking, let me crash people or whatever. And that was a lot of fun. So I don't know. I've just been on a little bit of a hiatus, and now it's just kind of clicked. It's like, oh man, this is this is good. And what's been really cool for me is like as I've been doing these study sessions, um, I had these like hours, like 3 hour long videos that I'm sitting there. They're pop quizzes. It's like, okay, we're gonna go over this, and this, and I don't have to physically do anything but just answer questions. So I'm putting on a race in the
Mm.
background, and I'm answering questions. And granted, I'm not actually live interacting with them. These are all pre-recorded. So it's like, what am I going to do with my hands?
Yeah.
I'm just going to play racing. So they're hitting at the right time for me. And that's been probably the theme for me this year. And I said this on the last podcast as we talked about game of the year stuff. And this year, things have spoke to me on a different level past just trophy hunting, past enjoyment. It's been like, I'm doing those two things and right time, right place. So, it's funny because you're like, oh, you might not be down with the racing stuff. I'm like, oh, actually, I'm just getting started because like I'm getting kind of primed up, warmed up,
Mm.
back to the swing of them. So,
Yeah, but you're right. It's like they're a distraction for your hands, and you can
yeah.
do that. Yeah, it's funny though the racing. Like I thought this would be the category we talk least about, so I won't detract us. But it's funny talking to a lot of the hardcore racing people, and like over the last few years, a lot of the big racing games have become difficult platinums. Well, not difficult platinums. They become very long platinums for meaningless grind, like reach level 50 in online, which is hugely variable on other people playing online hitting you, or driving, the circumference of the world, like ridiculous trophies that aren't about skill. They're just about time. And finding that balance in a game where people can come and play at the just like have a bit of fun with racing games versus the time that you want to get a bit of value for your money, but you also want a difficulty progression. And I'm not talking about like you just make the game play on the hardest settings. It has to have like some sort of a level. And obviously, there's going to be no game that will cover everybody. But it's funny, like Ride 4, for example, which majority of your audience won't probably play, even though they maybe played Ride 1, 2, or 3. If they do play 4, they're in for a shock because for some reason they decided to up the difficulty from the beginning. And so there's a lot of content in that game, but the platinum is much more about skill than it is about just sitting on your ass and moving the controller for long periods of time. And the skill in that game, unfortunately, is not something you can, like, it's right from the beginning, and it's not something you can learn in the game. You'd almost have to, have someone talk you through the track or talk you through accelerating apex, or hopefully you've played games before, or maybe you could watch videos, I'm not sure, just to pick up how to drive these bikes, and the angles and all this stuff. And the problem with that is, it's really good for those people that want the extreme, but it locks the majority of people out of the content. And, without going down a track, the WRC, and I know this is only an issue maybe for people that want platinums, but also if you want to experience the content of the game, it's an issue. But WRC 10, like you can do everything's fine. The create's good, handles wonderfully. They have this awesome Legends mode in it that goes from the early rallies in 1975 right through to current day, and it puts you in situations that have happened in real life, gives you the story, and then you have to do what the driver did. And they're so difficult. The times are so narrow that you can't get past the third event of 30 unless you're some sort of god. And it's just, this balance is really tricky in racing games, more so than any other genre. I find that it's either way too easy, it's way too difficult, or it's in the middle, but all you're doing is just spending a shitload of time because that's what they figured will just make the requirements lots of distance. So it's a really hard one to find, the answer to, I suppose. And I fear that it turns a lot of people off the genre too.
Yeah, I think that for me right now, I'm definitely leaning towards the easier games,
Mm,
and I think that that's hitting a good spot. So I kind of want to progress maybe to something a little more challenging after I knock these out, but I don't want to get into something that's going to frustrate me because
yeah,
the whole point is I just kind of want to drive and enjoy it.
that's right.
And I think what really got me interested into playing racing games again was the driving in Agents of Mayhem.
Yeah.
Like it's good. It's not bad. There's no real long spots for you to drive and enjoy yourself. And then so I went back and played some Saints Row, which also has fairly good driving in it. I'm like, man, this is cool. And I've had some stories I've told on the show before where like a certain song kicks in and then you're driving on a long stretch and you're just really feeling it and it's really enjoyable. And then of course jumping into Wreckfest and having fun. And so now all of a sudden all the pieces have kind of aligned themselves to where I'm like, yeah, this is what I want to do right now. I don't actually want to do much else. There's this is perfect for me in what I've got going on. So
It,
very, very much enjoying it.
I think maybe we should transition to open world because I know you've been playing a few, but it's funny you mentioned that because that, and I know there's people that are like Ubisoft. I hate these open world games, but probably my best gaming moment this year, and it's been a wonderful year for games for me myself. But the best gaming moment was earlier in the year, and I was playing Watchdog Legions, and I was in a car, and the radio station was on, and I accidentally, like, I was you try not to set off the security or whatever, because then they chase you. It's just the night hassle. It takes longer. And I clipped the guy by mistake, and I ended up with all these people following me. So it's hard to get away from people in that game. So I had this procession of like 8 cars behind me, and I'm trying to get away. And on the radio comes "Fuck You" by Lily Allen. And I was like, how awesome is this? Like there's shit going everywhere. I'm hitting things. I'm swearing at the thing. And I was like, it's just a freak moment. Obviously not programmed like whatever the rotation of the radio is to be. And I was like, this is wonderful. This is why you play games, moments like this. But it's oh, it was great.
Keeping on that theme of open world and still on a vehicle, I had a moment like that. Not not that big FU moment, but like the song came on at just the right time. The setting was good, playing on Days Gone.
Mm.
So just riding the bike and the song comes on. I think actually it doesn't come on the radio. It's actually like a scripted section of the game. But as you're transitioning from the main area that you start in to the mountains, did you play much Days Gone?
Look, no, that's on my list to play. I haven't played it at all.
Okay, so the first 8 hours or so is fine, but the game really picks up probably realistically 10 to 20 hours into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like when people say stuff like that. Like to me, that's like your game shouldn't take that long. But if you like Grand Theft Auto with zombies, then that's pretty much what Days Gone is.
Yeah.
Until the narrative really kicks in later in the game. And the narrative kicks in later in the game because they really want you to spend a lot of time in solitude, kind of doing things, and kind of remove your hope that you're ever going to find the people that you're looking for.
Mm.
Like you spend so much time like not finding who you think you're looking for that like you start to forget that that's even a thing. And then it comes in and it works. And there's a scene where this song slowly comes in and it's building emotion, it's building ambience and stuff. And you're going through these trails. You've got the sun rising and setting. And it's just one of those moments I was like, yes, this is hitting on all cylinders. This is really, really good. And I just, it was great. It was like one of those things where it's like, this was honestly, it's one of the standout moments of that game that I may never forget. Like it's that game is, I've spent like 40 hours just on the main campaign and all in a week.
That's the attraction of like the good open world game. And I know a lot of people shy away from it when you talk about 50+ hour games, but if it's done well, it will start slowly because it needs to, like the hook of those games, if you don't play them and you're like, they're insane, but you perhaps you don't understand the hook that or the trap, I suppose, for many people that get into it. But the trap of those games is that you start off weak and you become powerful. And by the 50 to 6 hour mark, you become very powerful, but the game doesn't end. That's where the real hook is. So now there might be things that can still kill you. There might be difficult things, but you're very powerful within the world. And you're going to be very powerful for the next 50 or 60 hours. And that's the hook, that you've put time in to build yourself up to that position. And it's not ended. Like most games you play, linear games, you build your strength, you add abilities as you go. And by the time you got everything, the game's over. And it's like, well, what happens now? Maybe New Game Plus. But these games, you're progressing yourself to a point that you can almost do anything in the world. You're in control of it, I suppose. It's like God complex or something. And I think if you find one that jives with you, then it's incredibly addictive or whatever else. But it's more powerful than any other sort of game you're going to play, because you're almost, like you said, you can make your own stories within the world, and you almost feel like you're shaping the world, which is a bizarre thing to say on a fixed system, fixed game or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's got that sense of investment. And I don't know. I always hear people go, "Oh, the ideal game is around 20 hours." I think many games are way too long, but there are many games that are 50 hours that if they'd have just done that and then added the next 50, it would have been amazing. But maybe too long for some people. But it's that feeling you want to capture, and it's a reverse feeling too, because like I started playing Valhalla again, and I thought it was amazing on the Xbox. I've gone back to play it on the PS5, and a story of a game that's had all the content out now. Some more coming next year, but a ton of content, so well streamlined, and I can see myself spending another 200 hours over time in this world. And it's just because you're slowly building your character up. I'll reach a point where it stops, and then you just you can take on anything and in any way. And I think it's wonderful, like that type of thing. Maybe similar to Days Gone, I suppose.
I don't know that Days Gone is as good as Valhalla. I haven't opened my copy of Valhalla yet, but it was good. And it hit for me at the right time. I had COVID. I was stuck in my room. Like, my wife was playing by the rules and making me quarantine. And after 4 days, I was relatively fine. I mean, granted, I was tired, but I mean, that's just. I mean, I played a lot of video games that week, that 10 days, and it was perfect for that game because I was able to dig into it and enjoy the story very, very consistently, because that's all I did for a couple days. And for me, I don't know that I ever would have finished that game had it not been for that. And I am very grateful for being able to put in the time, because it was a great story. It was a good game.
Yeah.
So I definitely, it was good. I highly recommend it. It's not Sony's best game, but it's definitely not their worst game. So I thought it was cool.
Yeah. It's hard because they're so long, as you say. So if you're only going to play one a year, which one do you play? And then by the time you realize it's not the one you wanted, you've put 20 hours in. So what do you do now?
Yeah.
It's
well,
tricky.
on the subject of these big open world games, and I've mentioned this on the show, but I am playing Mafia, the definitive edition.
Excellent.
It is so good. Like, and I've played and beat the original, and so going into this, there's certain everything looks so good, and it's been so many years. I'm so far removed. I don't really remember it, but there's definitely sections when I get to it, I'm like, I remember this. I remember this turn. I remember this area. I remember I'm going to have to come back here more than once in this game. And it is so incredibly good. The voice acting is really well done. The story, the way it's being told, even the chapters as they're being told, they're not narrated, but they're guided through a conversation between two people. And then you go and you do those sections, and it's so good. It's one of these games that, like, I've played. I think I did 4 missions today, 3 or 4 missions today, and not true. I did 1, 2, 3, 4. I did 4 missions today. I did 4 missions a few days ago, a few days before that, and it's so enjoyable. And they did so many things right on this game. Like, obviously giving it a touch up and a fresh, a facelift is good. But, like, even the collectibles that naturally show up on the map that's so cool. Like, it's not frustrating to go look for them. I'm not worried about, like, oh, it's this big open world game. There's all these collectibles. Am I going to miss them all? Like, if you get near one, it'll pop up on your map. And I think that's awesome. And the fact that it allows you to skip the driving in between missions. I don't remember the original doing that. It's possible that it did, but that is so cool, because for the most part, I enjoy driving from point A to point B in my games. This game, there's some narrative and some world building in between the missions, like going from point A to point B, if you have another character with you. Sometimes you don't. And sometimes you have to drive over here to have a conversation, to drive over here to have a conversation. And the fact that, like, it respects my time so much that I'm allowed to, I'm just going to skip the driving part from here to here, and it's going to put me right where I need to be. it's just it's so this game is clicking. It's really clicking for me.
It's a game that like oozes style as well, like graphically,
Yes.
everything. It's like they go to that. It's like you play a game, open world game, and they're reading a letter, and it's just squiggles. You know, you see that, and you're like, oh, it's whatever, it's a game. But then they go the extra step, and they actually write the article in the magazine that's on the counter that you
Yes.
may or may never read, but it's there if you want to. You know, the radio's playing, you know, a period song, and like it's those little touches that whether you notice them or not, they add to the whole experience. That game, yeah. The problem with that game is it's so good though, Daryl, that then you go, okay, well, I want to play 2 and I've got to play the old 2. And then I've got to play
Yeah.
3, which is a devastating fire truck of a mess, you know? So it's such a shame that, the other 2 aren't, well, they never, you know, maybe they'll remake 2 eventually because it's a very good game, but 3, I'm not sure what they can say.
Well, they did a definitive edition of 2, which is essentially just a remaster, a facelift. So I don't know, but I remember playing part 2. I don't think I finished that one. I've been going back and forth with myself on whether or not I beat that one on Xbox 360. So I will definitely be playing it. And again, next year I'm gonna be getting a lot of these games knocked out. So it's definitely, I definitely want to follow up with another Mafia game, but it also got me wanting to watch some Mafia shows or watching some Mafia movies. And so I started The Sopranos the other night and then stopped. I was like, I don't know, this is what I'm looking for. I think I need to go farther back, maybe some Godfather or some Scarface, something, something a little farther. But I put on the first episode of Sopranos and I was like, not the time frame I'm looking for. So I stopped.
It's hard, isn't it? It's that thing of finding the right one to
because you can't. As much as I wish I could be in front of a video game all the time, but I can't.
No.
So then, whenever I'm like, well, what can I do in the time that I'm not in a game? It still kind of reminds me of the experience that I'm going with, and that's kind of what I was looking for. But unfortunately, I hadn't found that yet. So.
Well, that sounds good. The only other one I played quite a few open world this year. I played. I don't know if you ever got to it, the Ghost Recon Breakpoint. It fixed
No, not yet.
much better now. I really enjoyed that. Another game where you get stronger, more competent as you go. I thought it was great. Far Cry 6 for me is not. I don't know what's going on with that series. Far Cry 6 is Far Cry 4, but it's like the serious man's Far Cry 4. They've taken out all the craziness. And it's just, it's more like a shooting, serious shooter. I don't know. And like, I really like 5. So I have nothing wrong. 5 was my favorite. So I like the way the series was going. I like the open world nature of it. But I don't know. It doesn't gel with me. But then I assume that's the same people with Valhalla. Because I've heard that they don't like, the style. It's too space. So I think it's, horses for courses. Still a good game or whatever. But they're my open worlders. Did you have any other one?
Well, I did, but I kind of wanted to touch on Far Cry for a minute.
Yeah.
I didn't buy 6 yet because I didn't play 5 or New Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
I bought both of those, but I just unfortunately, with Far Cry, it's very in a time. Like it's very. I played Far Cry 3, absolutely loved it. Went through and got the platinum, had a blast. Put in Far Cry 4. Had a really excuse me, I lied. I played Far Cry. What's the prehistoric one?
Oh, yes, with the language.
Yeah. What's it called? Primal. I played Far Cry Primal. Absolutely loved it. Played it. Platinumed it. Put in Far Cry 4. Played 40%, and then just stopped. And I bought 5 because I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to beat this game. But I hadn't got that far. Yeah, I've got 26 of the 58 trophies. So I've got 42% of the base game. And I don't know, man. I just didn't finish it. It just hadn't, that one wasn't grabbing me. But 5 looked like it was going to have the best story.
Yeah.
But I just hadn't finished that one.
5's an awkward one because the story's split. I can see why people didn't like it. Split sort of 3 different ways, and then an overarching story. And then also the platinum is awkward because they incorporated the multiplayer arcade into it as well, which is dicey. The whole thing is a bit. I really enjoyed it. I thought that it had the craziness. I just think that they lean on that Espirito guy, the Breaking Bad Chicken Man, or whatever, hugely, Gus in 6, and it's not in it much. And I don't know, it's too serious. I think, for that series.
Yeah.
It's
I hear
a
that
shame.
I hear that if you do a lot of side content, you get more of him. Like it's
Yeah.
not just main campaign stuff.
Yeah, I'll definitely gonna finish it, I think, but it's so funny because I sort of started, like, Valhalla, Far Cry 6, and the new expansion for Final Fantasy 14, Endwalker, all in the same week, and I thought, "I am only gonna be playing one of these at this point, so I'll start all 3, and whichever one grabs me," and I was sure it would be 14 because I love that game, and I was like, "I will need this game to sit with me for a while," and it turned out to be Valhalla, the oldest of
Hmm.
the 3, so, horses just whichever one you like, I think, at the time, but
Yep. That's the best way to do it. Yeah, as I'm glancing back through, I played a good handful of single player narrative games,
mm.
focus games. Resident Evil 8 isn't really open world, even though it has some open sections to it, but it's definitely not what you'd consider an open world game. So I think that's really it for me. I think everything else from this point on is pretty straightforward stuff.
Well, if I can beg your indulgence, I know it's getting very late there, so if you want to
Oh,
pull
you're good, man.
pull the pin, but if I can beg your indulgence, my favorite category of games, I have to throw in one or two, is and I know you don't play these at all, so and no, it's not the titty anime games, although they may fall into this category. Although actually, you do play those now, don't you? So,
Whoa, whoa,
you
whoa,
could
whoa,
mention
whoa.
that. But is the JRPG or whatever else? And so I just run through. I played a lot of JRPG this year, but predominantly because of the time. Um, the COVID time, you had so much more time, and I know you're a Sacred Symbols listener, and I remember a couple of years ago that Colin Moriarty was like having a crisis of faith in games, and what he was
Yes.
playing, and he's like, I need to play one JRPG a month, or I should play one JRPG
Yep.
a month, and I started doing that last year, and it's a commitment, but it's definitely doable if you want it to be, and so I sort of my notable ones for this year, I suppose, and I know some of your listeners are playing them. I played a Yakuza Kiwami 2, and Like a Dragon, all within the space of about a month and a half, which probably don't advise. That's a lot, a lot of Yakuza, but they're amazing, amazing games if you like those, and perhaps the most mainstream of JRPGs. All the others are pretty extreme, so if you don't like JRPGs, stop, avert your ears now. But played Lost Judgment, which is the spin-off to the
Yeah.
Yakuza series, which I think, again, if you didn't want to play the Yakuza and you wanted to play Judgment and Lost Judgment, you'd have to play them in that order. The order they're intended. Wonderful games. And Lost Judgment, one of the rare JRPGs that's clever enough to hide all the side content away from the main story. A lot of JRPGs gate the main story behind leveling and side content. So you get sucked into, 5 hours of 10 hours of doing this thing before you can go back to the story. This game doesn't do that. You can play the whole story and never touch that if you want, or touch it, or do it at the end, whatever you want. So it's a very respectful of your time, which is unusual in this category. And then I play Tales of Berseria, which is extreme. Still not sure how I feel about that. Tales of Arise, which I know a few of your people are talking about. I know this game, people love to say they're playing Tales of Arise, and that's where they stop. They don't actually talk about it because they put in like 10 hours and they don't know they've hardly even scratched the surface,
Right.
100 plus hours. But it's so funny this game is getting mainstream love because these are like fringe, for me, these are like fringe JRPGs, and they're grindy, they're slow, the combat is a bit janky, it relies on skits and a lot of reading. There's not a lot of voice stuff or in this one. And like it's very JRPG, the leveling, the character relations, which is awesome if you love these games, but a bit of a turnoff, I would have thought, if you didn't. But people seem to be loving it, so I'll be interested to see how Joe goes with that if he does
Yep.
manage to get there. Uh,
Yeah, he's definitely committed to that one. He actually he was pledged on Patreon
yes.
to knock out that one.
Well, I
So
thought he would like that one. It's a good one.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's actually he said he's gonna wait on a deal, pick it up on
Yeah,
a
of
deal
course.
because
Yeah.
he said he's gonna burn right through it as soon as he gets it.
See, I'm like a confession. I bought that on the Xbox, and then for some reason I thought, oh, maybe I could plat that game because I was speaking to Zador, and he's like, it's not so bad, relative. And I was like, maybe I'll buy it on the PlayStation. Now I have it on both. The chance of me ever finishing it on both are very unlikely. But one, maybe. Thank God for the digital console, so I can't sell it back. Uh-huh.
There
But
you go.
and then
You can't regret your decision.
the only other one, Scarlet Nexus, which if you're sitting on the fence about this game, is really good. It is a time commitment, the story is across both player arcs, so it's a 50-hour time commitment, though no grinding. I thought it was excellent. Really good combat, really good powers and combos and things like that. Good story as well, although you do need to pay attention to the story. It's quite convoluted, quite involved, I suppose, as well. Blue Reflection, which is the sequel to, or Blue Reflection 2, I should say, the sequel, which I think is great, but I'm on an outlier on that series as well. You'd like that series though, Darrell, because it's all young schoolgirls that spend a lot of time in shower scenes when they're not out fighting monsters.
Oh my gosh. I got hit on Patreon again for another pervy Japanese game. So I'm telling you.
Well, your friend there, he likes the Senran games, which are pretty racy, but
Oh yeah.
Blue Reflection, I'm amazed this game ever got localized to the West, because not only is it racy, but it's also like pretty pure translated Japanese. The Senran games are a little bit like you've played them. Like the girls look racy, but the dialogue is not too bad. Blue Reflection, it's all hanging out there. Like the suggestions and everything's in the dialogue and the way they stand and everything. It's one the slowly bending over to get through the gate, and wonderful series. But no, they are aside from that, they're like a, if you haven't heard of them, they're like a light Persona game. So you can finish them in 30 hours as opposed to 80 hours Persona game take.
Oh.
But in a similar style. And then I think the only other one, this one's interesting. I don't know. I throw it out there in case anyone makes it this far and they're just buying games for the fun of it, I suppose. Is the Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaibo? I think then Hinokami Chronicles. Mouthful, I can tell you. This is a fighting game based on an anime. It's beautiful animation. I haven't watched the animation, but in the game, it takes cutscenes, I assume, from the first season or whatever else. It has an open world-ish sense to it in that there are maps you go through or whatever else that are punctuated with like 2.5D fighting. Like a fighter, where you're expected to use combos, sort of like a Mortal Kombat without the blood, I suppose. Guts and stuff, and it's a really good game with a deep story, and it looks like it's going to be a really cheap, nasty knockoff, but it's anything from that, which was a bit of a surprise. I think it's a Koei Tecmo, but I may be wrong on that one. Could be somebody else, but yeah, it's a pretty good year for JRPGs this year too. Actually, very good year.
All right. Well, I've got a few that I can add to this. Not as much on the I played them side as I have, and I intend to. So I'm sitting here scrolling through my PS5 as we're talking, and I was like, man, I just downloaded a bunch of Final Fantasy games because I started Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2 on the Vita for the second or third time, and then my memory card died. So I was like, I lost my game save again. Only a few hours into it, but I'm like, I just, that's the second time I lost that game save. I was like, I don't know that I can do that again. So on my PS5 right now, I just recently downloaded Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 8 Remastered, Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2. Now, I don't know which one I'm going to get into and stick with, but I remember really enjoying Final Fantasy 9 from when I was younger. So I think that's going to be the one I jump into first. I know 8 is supposed to be a better game, but I remembered 9 because 9 is the one where that's actual, or is it 8 that they're actually like full-size characters, not the chibi versions?
I don't like 8. 8 has a lot of the triple triad in it, the card game.
Okay.
That's what turned me off. But I hear the story is supposed to be very good. Yeah.
Either way, I've got them all downloaded, and I figured that would be something I would dabble into. I haven't played a Final Fantasy game, like a old school Final Fantasy game, in so many years. I've just been kind of like, I got the itch. We'll see what happens. No promises, because I've tried a few times. Now, I did play. You were talking about Lost Judgment, Yakuza and stuff. That same team made the Fist of the North Star.
Yes.
Now, that is a game I played, I put 12 or 13 hours into, and eventually just bailed because it was so much of the same, and I didn't feel like I was making any progress. Now, I still have my game save, and I could go back to it at any time, but that is one that I like. I wanted that game from the minute I saw it. I saw a trailer for it. I was like, oh, this is awesome. First off, I hadn't played a Fist of the North Star game since I was a kid, so this is going to be cool. And then those are always so combat heavy. I'm like, surely this is going to be like this 3D, like cell shaded ish, that style that they use, just over the top, beat 'em up game with crazy fatalities. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And I don't know. It's interesting.
You should put
It's
that
very
down and
interesting.
play Judgment. 13 hours would see you through it, and I think you would enjoy it more.
Yeah, and I really want to. I really want to. So I made it almost halfway through. I'm on chapter 5. And there's only 10 chapters or 11 chapters. So I was like right at the halfway point, 13 hours in. I'm like, I'm not really going anywhere. So I bounced off of it. But I do want to play the Judgment games. They look good. I've played some Yakuza. I just have never, it just never clicked. So maybe I'll start with Judgment and Judgment will click. So we'll see.
Well, I just think, we're in a subgenre of a genre now with JRPG or whatever, and then Yakuza. But a lot of people. Well, I don't know how people sit because I've sort of stayed well outside of the community for the last few months, and I try to avoid Game of the Year things. So I don't know how people sit, but this year, some of the games that come out have been phenomenal, and I know it's been in development for ages, but. Just on that Yakuza line, to get Yakuza Like a Dragon, probably not for you because it's like an 80-hour JRPG in old style, but to get Like a Dragon and then also to get Lost Judgment in the same year that sort of comes out, a Final Fantasy 14 expansion comes out as well with all these things. The Scarlet Nexus comes out by Bandai Namco. It's a totally different style of JRPG. And then Tale of Arise, a traditional old school-ish JRPG that gets, good push from Microsoft and PlayStation alike. So it's been wonderful. Like if you're playing JRPG, you cannot, not be happy this year, and you could also not be up to date because it's just ridiculous amount of good games there. So, and
Absolutely.
the funniest thing that neither of us talked about, I'm sure it's on your list to play for next year. It's high up on my list is the Cyberpunk, of course, 2077. But two others actually I want to shout out because I think we both should play this. I've already played it once, but I'll play it again. Is the Terminator Resistance
yes
enhanced because they brought out some DLC for the PS5 story DLC. So perhaps we should check that out in the next year.
Absolutely.
And then also I want to give, as we're winding up here, just a thank you and a shout out to Kalai. I don't use my Switch for anything other than a paperweight, of which it's very effective. But I decided to give it a go. And she talked passionately about this game, Bravely Default 2, a month or two ago. A game that interests me greatly. And what sold me on that game was she was talking about the fact that you could send your ships off if you like while you're actually working to grind away for you, and so it's like a progressive game, I suppose. It plays while you're not there too. And I thought, this sounds really good. So she did a wonderful job selling a game on a system that I'm not interested in. So I did pick that up, and I think they're my 3 big ones for next year.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I've still got a list of games that I committed to earlier in the year that I'm rolling over into next year. So I've got this next year. I think I'm going to really make some progress on some of these bigger games, and there's some big stuff coming next year too. So hopefully we'll see. Maybe the spam has been holding me back, CJ. Maybe
it's been refining your skills so that you're ready to take on these. I think you will. And we didn't touch on your team in the GTASK at this that's going on at the moment, but you guys are doing really well. And it's all well and good for some teams, the majority of teams, just to be buying every game under the sun, which is what's happening to boost their score. But you guys are doing it properly, and it's a shout out to your team leader as well. You're playing the games as you should be playing them, playing for fun as well. And it's been really good to see you get as far as you have. It'll be disappointing to knock you out in a few weeks, but that's bound to happen. And then also we didn't talk about, but it's wonderful to see you draft Yield in to that other competition, a skill-based competition. And I thought Yield's an interesting pick because he only plays the Battleships game or whatever else, but that is a rare game. And so I was like, I should check out what old Yield's been up to. And blow me away, Yield drops a 1% platinum, a game that is definitely too hard for me, that Baja Racing, I think it was.
Yes,
and I was like, that's impressive because that is not an easy game. Glitchy, but also very difficult. So a good draft pick for you guys in a skill-based competition.
Well, the thing is, he had to, and I mentioned this in the Discord that's monitoring this winter trophy hunting event, and I said I would be covering this. At first, I asked, "Hey, are there any podcasts kind of covering and supporting this event?" And of course, everybody's like, "No." I was like, "Well, hey, I'll definitely do that on the Loot Bros," and I got some eye rolls on there, and I'm like, yeah, sure, it was a cheap plug for my show, but I also think these things are cool. I want to talk about them, so. so it's been really cool to see like how this works and all the different commands that are set up through the whatchamacallit, through the Discord,
Yes.
and so it's been cool having Yield. I actually said I didn't know that Yield would be a team player because Yield likes to play what Yield likes to play, and he's very open about that on the show. So I didn't know if he would be into what we're doing. And this one, like you said, it's skill based. It's all about getting the rare trophies, and there is a point value assigned for that. So right now we are currently in 26th place out of 38 teams. We were in 19th place yesterday, 11th place on the GTTSC. But it's myself, MZ, and Gaz. Same team for GTTSC is also doing this one.
Mm.
And then we added Yield and the Bearded Nerd. So I am at 4,937 points on this trophy. I'm leading my team by about 500 points. And it's been cool because Yield and I have been going back and forth on who takes that top spot. And I had kind of planned out some I've got like rare trophies set up to drop every week for the next few weeks. During the what do you call it? GSAT is what you call it. This trophy event, because I can't really sink the time that I want to in them. So I've got to be strategic on how I drop my points so that I keep my team in the running. Hopefully we hit the bonuses, and that way when things get a little tougher, we can have the bonuses to rely on. There's no way we're going to beat Ike Menzie and you guys.
Nobody's going to beat Ike. No
one's going to beat Ike.
Show.
So we're not going to win, but the goal is to make it as close to the end as possible. And we've done a really good, Gaz has done a really good job of just kind of keeping things organized. It's like, hey, maybe you should lean into this one, what have you. Also tying us into this winter event for PSN profiles. And so it's called the Winter Tag Team 2021, if anybody's curious about it. But it's been very interesting to be in this group, and someone like day one drops like these crazy ultra rare Super Meat Boy trophies, and like they just blew us out of the water. There's no catching up from their week one where they stacked their plats and went at it.
Yeah.
But it's been very cool because this has been priming me to get ready to go into a year of no spam celibacy, as I'm calling it. And I'm excited because now I'm already in these events that are going to coast into the beginning of the year. So I got to focus on more rare trophies. I've got to focus on legit, bigger games, what have you. And then from there, I'm gonna smash through it. And who knows? I might be a real gamer by the end of this whole thing.
Well, the other advantage is you run a podcast, you're gonna meet some interesting characters, some skilled gamers with stories that like to talk, and maybe you could have them on, and it'll just this beautiful thing will happen, this new show that will sort of evolve here with you at the head. So I look forward to it. And look, I make a joke, but to your team, MZ and Gareth, don't give up hope, because the one great thing about Ike is that he plays everything, but he also goes balls to the wall. And we're carrying about 20,000 of overinflated TT diff at the moment. So we're going to be in a lot of trouble in the next couple of weeks if he can't find more games to play and finish. So it's not out of the realm of possibility we will end up with a minus 5,000 to dig ourselves out of in the next few weeks, the way that thing's going. So it could be one of the great crash and burns of that tournament, I think.
Well, there's definitely been some weeks where we go into it and we've got our, I tend to get 1,500 points or more every week. I've been pretty consistent on that. And so we kind of hover the 22nd, 23rd position. Like I said, we spent a couple days at 11. I'm not sure where we're at right now. I'm trying to look at it, but there were days where some people gotten, hundreds and hundreds of negative points. Yeah, we're in 12 right now, and it's like, man, some teams got more negative points than we got in positive points that whole week.
That's right.
And it's like that trophy decay is serious.
It is. It's a wonderful snowballing event. So we'll see how that goes. But it's always fun. It's always fun towards the end that event.
It's definitely been interesting, and I like it. I think it's very cool, and it's made me think about my moves. It's making me think about like, okay, I need to pick some games that are going to, last me through the week in points until the weekend when I actually get my time to play. But this week and next week are holidays and there's a lot going on, so it's going to be very interesting. But there's a couple people I want to point out. I just want to mention them. Maybe we'll have them on the show, maybe we won't. Number 37 in the individual GSAT competition is Anime Today.
Yes, I saw that. It's a wonderful name.
Anime Today. Like, what?
It's amazing because I'm pretty sure you have to have your PSN name showing on that site. So it's amazing he's flown under the radar with that name still with Sony.
It's so good. So good. And then there's one in the PSN, the winter event. His name is his Discord name. I don't know if this is his actual PSN name, but if it is, it's amazing. It's Long Schlong Silver.
It's wonderful. Yes, yeah. You'll meet some characters on that side. But I had a look at the field, and it's great to see they're supporting that because there are some serious gamers in that field. Some of those guys are Floris that I spoke to a few years ago. It was an unbelievable gamer. He's in there. They're in a team of just machines. I think they have more ultra rares between them than they actually have, normal trophies. I don't know how you do that, but so there's the sort of every trophy they have, it's ultra rare pretty much. So yeah,
that's insane.
It is insane. Very much so.
But it's cool though, and then one thing I want to do is I want to use these events as talking points on the show. Like I said, I'm gonna reach out to some of these people. I have them on, and it's maybe like I look at you with Avocation to Climb, and you're in a class of the upper echelon top trophy hunters. Maybe I can get a bunch of mid cards on here with me.
Yeah, of course. Well, look, seeing you were kind enough to throw us a bone there, we did actually record our monthly-esque 3-month episode or something last night, and it was a massive G task or whatever on the achievement side, deep dive and fest. So for most of your listeners, you will not be interested at all. But if for any of you that are, and it's not me talking most of the time, it is them talking. They go more into how Decay works and how they plan. They're very careful not to talk about games, of course, because I think they're going to try and win it apparently this year on the Xbox side. Well, they're going to try and give it a good run, but it is interesting to hear. They know how the sort of things work. So I found it quite interesting.
See, that's awesome. That's I would listen to it no matter what you do on there, but that's the kind of thing that gets me excited because, I not a lot of people are talking about this stuff, like I listen to a lot of podcasts and I just, there's a whole world of cool things happening that people aren't talking about. So that's been kind of my new focus is I want to be involved in some of that stuff and I'll probably never win them, but at least I'm participating and I'm having a good time.
It's wonderful. I feel like I'm passing the reins over to you as I drift off into the background, wanting nothing to do with the community and happy to play my single player game. But I look forward to seeing you taking the reins and running. And it was great. It was great to talk today. Obviously, I really enjoyed it. And I thank you for indulging me or whatever else, because I know I tend to take over, as many of your listeners would know. But also, listeners, you can rest assured, I was a little worried that Darrell might be like, fuck you all, I'm closing this thing down. But we talked for quite some time beforehand, and he's very passionate about continuing on and very excited. So I think as listeners, we are very excited as well, sir. And I suppose on behalf of the listeners, because you don't give them, as much rope to hang themselves as you do me, I must thank you and wish you and your family a Merry Christmas and a wonderful start to the next year.
Well, thank you, CJ. I am very glad to close this year out with you. I think this has been a great year of you and I getting to work together. We flirted with this idea for quite some time before we actually started doing consistent shows together.
I had to close down a podcast to get this done.
Well, like I told you before, and I don't just say it, I mean it. Anytime you need to just jabber your jaws and get it out of your system, you are always welcome on the show with me. I thoroughly do enjoy your company. I enjoy us talking and shooting the breeze. I do appreciate you passing the torch because you never know, maybe this time next year I will be in the top 100 on the leaderboards. Maybe I won't go spam free. And and definitely Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and your family as well. I hope that you enjoy it, and as to continue the bit with the listeners, when you get on back on the road and get back on the run from the Australian government, we will not reveal where you're at, but we're definitely here whenever you can sneak away and get on the show.
I look forward to it. So thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Normally I would go in and post and just kind of add all the different things, but you guys have just been given 2 hours and 18 minutes of podcast gold. And CJ and I didn't even really talk about the main release AAA, big hitters. So that's a lot of games, a lot of content for you to just kind of marinate on. I think that this has been a very genuine and very good conversation. So I definitely appreciate you being here and let me do this. This has been a good time. And again, I've said it twice now, but I'll say it one more time, and then we're out of here. I can't think of a better way to end the year. So 2021 is done. We'll be picking this thing back up in 2022, and who knows? Maybe I'll spam, maybe I won't. Definitely appreciate you guys listening. Check out the Patreon. We'll have some special goodies in there for you. Thank you, CJ. We're out of here.
Thanks be to God in Christ.